Good evening and welcome to another episode of Livid Comics Lair. Tonight we are blessed with two fantastic guests. We have Suzanne Shultz, who is the owner, creator, CEO of Canvas Fine Arts, which is a coaching agency that helps artists get better at what they do. We're also blessed with Solo Perry, who runs Ka-Pow School, which is a comic art school. So kind of a nice blend here, guys, where we have a bridge between fine art and we also have comics. So hopefully there's something in here for everybody. And feel free to ask questions at the bottom. We're going to be running live Q&A here. So whatever questions you got about relating to coaching or art or comics or drawing, feel free to ask and we'll be happy to help answer them for you. Boom, and we're live. There we go.
Hey, we're back.
Welcome, everybody. So, why don't we just start off? Suzanne, tell us a little bit about what you do, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I have worked for the last 10 years plus working with artists and just helping them find their way.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit more about that. How do you help them find their way?
So most artists have no idea how to do the business end of it. So I know that this might be not very popular with your audience, but creating a business plan and finding out like what your ultimate goal is and just going forward with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we're going to be dipping into that a little bit and talking about some of the perils and pitfalls and success that artists have. So definitely going to go down that road a little bit tonight. Awesome. All right, Solo, you're up. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and what you got going on.
Well, thanks, first of all, for having me. I am Dr. Solo Perry. I'm coming to you guys from Chicago, Illinois. I have been haunting the industry for about 30 years, and I say haunting. You know, if we have time, I'll get into my story later. I've been very industry adjacent. That's my new phrase, adjacent, right? I've been very industry adjacent for a very long time. But I'm actually a retired Chicago police officer. I've been, like I said, in and out of, doing a lot of, freelance stuff here and there over the years. And since retirement, I really, decided, with whatever skills that I have, I thought, teaching kind of is right up my alley, and so I am starting Ka-Pow, the Comic Art Academy, aka Ka-Pow School. I created an app for artists and writers. I actually created it myself, so I'm proud of it. Yeah, like I knew nothing about designing an app, right? And then I had one of my bright marketing ideas. And luckily, someone who coded it was actually a family member, but I had to learn how to prototype it. So I prototyped it myself, and we're officially launching Ka-Pow in the fall. And I'm the head art director and the founder of Honor Studios Entertainment. That's kind of where I really cut my teeth, really into the comics and the indie scene. Honor Studios Entertainment, where we produce what we call secularly competitive, faith-inspired entertainment. Our tagline is, it's entertainment for Christ's sake, right? And so, we've had modest success with that in the past, and we're actually just relaunching with a tabletop game coming out and a reinvention of our flagship property. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Sounds like you got a lot going on, buddy. Keep you busy.
I do.
Yeah.
Retirement, right?
Right. Yeah. probably busier now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Joel and I talk about that. Like we have day jobs, and then we're up till, and now we're zero too. Actually, now we're all texting, all three of us, but we're up till 1, 2 in the morning doing the comic stuff. So it's just like it's a grind, but it's a passion too. So
It is.
yeah.
It is. You know, like they say in business, and I'm sure Susan can attest to this. And I love what she said about helping artists navigate through the business side of it. You know, that's was part of my hurdle when I first came in. You know, most artists, as we all know, let's just be honest, we are notoriously bad business people. You know what I mean? And that's pervasive in the industry, right? And so for me, that was one of the first big lumps that I took until I got my business IQ up, you know, with Honor Studios, because quite honestly, I wasn't prepared for the success that we had because I didn't expect it when we launched our flagship book, you know, and it smacked me completely on my keister, you know, and now fast forward, you know, almost 20 years later, I've leveled up, you know, got business mentors and the whole 9 yards and started reading like crazy. And so, you know, the fact that Susan offers a service like that specifically, you know, to artists, that's huge because it's very sorely needed.
Yeah, I think we're having some weather issues in the area, so maybe she lost the feed. So hopefully she jumps back on. So if not, we can have her back on.
That sound that was coming in too must have been. She must have had some weird connection issues. Cause
yeah, we got some weather up here. It's been windy as heck. So yeah, so yeah, we worked with Suzanne in the past, and it was nice, you know. And one of the things when I came to her artistically early on is I had all these huge ideas of things that I want to do. Man, it's like, you know, I want to go have like this gallery show, and I want to have the big international show in Miami, and I'm a nobody, right? So I'm nothing, right? And she's like, no. You need to like focus on one or two small things, right? And there's like 100 steps, and you could probably talk to this too. So it's probably very similar with the comic world, right? There's 100 steps you need to get to before you even think about doing that. Like I've done stupid things like pay, you know, people to review my stuff just to tell me I suck, just to say that they reviewed my stuff. You know, so that's real things you got to do. But you can put it in a resume and say this guy, you know, this guy reviewed my stuff, right? So. Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what are some things like a brand new student comes to you, you know, maybe they're, you know, good talent, moderate talent, but, you know, they have these crazy ideas, right? Like, what's some of the things that you see people doing, like, wrong, I guess, right off the bat?
I think a lot of times young artists come in, they're very grandiose, right? Very ostentatious with what they want to accomplish with their work. And granted, I don't knock that, but it has to be measured, right? It's got to be really measured. I'm actually quite the opposite, believe it or not. One of the things that my studio mates, I think, has drawn them to me, and the people that work with me at Honor Studios and even with Ka-Pow, is that I'm more like a businessman who happens to be able to draw. Yeah,
it's important.
That's a good thing. He just happens to be able to draw, right?
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, it's important, and I tell a lot of my students, do the unpleasant part first, because the fun stuff comes easy. You know, the drawing, the writing, the expressing yourself, that's the easy part, right? I remember when we launched War in Paradise issue 0 right here back in 2004, right? And I had just, let me back up a little bit. I started in animation. Okay. I'm natively an animation guy.
Nice.
Right. And when I got out of the military, I drew my whole life, but it turned out that when I got out of the military, just like most people coming out of the military, I couldn't find a job. Right. I had kids. And so my godmother reached out to a gentleman that went to high school with her and my mom. Right. And they used to have Bible study together. And he actually remembered me from the Bible studies. He said, you know, I was like 2 or 3 years old, and I would always be in the corner with my crayons drawing while they had Bible study. Right. And his name was John McClanahan. And he was like a 12, 15-year vet at Hanna-Barbera. And he had come to Chicago and just opened up a studio in the south suburbs called Star Tunes. Right. And so, you know, nepotism is king. So I reached out to him, you know, I played the "Hey, remember me" card. Right.
Well, why not? Right.
You know, yeah. And so he kind of took me on as an intern, you know, and, you know, I wasn't getting paid, but I was, you know, able to rub shoulders with all the key artists. And this was pre-digital. This is, you know, we're talking we're talking 93, 94.
Sure.
Right? Talking 93, 94. Photos, show you how old it is. Adobe Animate, previously Adobe Flash, was then named Adobe Future Splash. That was his first name.
Yeah.
Adobe Future Splash, and it was brand new, right?
Right.
And so he took me on as, you know, and I would come show up like 2 or 3 times a week, you know, fetch coffee, learn, do some in-betweens. You know, got to jump on, you know, some grunt work on some of the properties at the time. They were doing Batman the Animated Series, episodes of Animaniacs. You know, that stuff was being outsourced to smaller studios. Not very different than it's done today. And so it was there that I met my mentor, who became my mentor. Right now, you know, I was raw like every other young artist, never taught, never educated. I'm self-taught the whole 9 yards. But he was like a comics legend. Even then, his name is Doug Rice, and I don't know if you guys remember this. I don't know if you guys are how far your history goes back, but do you remember a company called First Comics? It's called
boy.
It's
in the fuzz. It's in the fuzz, man.
They were what Image became. They were the first attempt of industry artists that broke away from Marvel and DC and launched their indie book, and they were really. It was him. It was a guy named Hilary Barta, who's still in the industry. And they launched First Comics, and really it was the precursor. I tell people Tom McFarlane didn't come up with that. He remembered First Comics. First Comics tried it first.
Well,
right?
he's always said, don't make a new idea, just take an existing idea and make it cooler, right?
Yeah,
so that makes sense that he would do that. So
they did that, and so he actually really took a shining to me, and he just kind of took me under his wing. And I started going to meeting him twice a week at his apartment, just picking his brain, and we would just sketch, and he would just tear me a new one. You know what I mean? And that's when I really started my art education. Well, fast forward, I needed a job, so I got in the police department. I needed something that actually paid, right? And so, but while I was there is when I actually wrote, because I was so inspired by the creative atmosphere. Actually wrote back then. There was this trend in animation. It was Brother Bear, Pocahontas, Joseph and his Technicolor coat, whatever. It was all this faith-centered stuff that was hitting the screen, right? From different belief systems, right? And I'm like, okay. I said, the classic story of good versus evil, that's everywhere. So I'm like, why don't I tell a story of the birth of evil in the universe? So I wrote War in Paradise, which is about the fall of Lucifer. It's
nice. There you go. Right.
Yes, sounds great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to start at the beginning, you know what I mean? And make it kind of like this epic civil war thing. What happens when a third of your brothers betray you and war breaks out in, you know, in the universe, right? For the first time ever, right? You know, and so anyway, I wrote it. And fast forward a few years now, I'm actually, you know, I didn't have the money obviously to do it because I wrote it as an animated synopsis for, you know, a screenplay, right?
Oh wow, yeah.
And so, and you know, I didn't have the resources to do it. I just knew that my credit was good with Star Tunes. I just knew that, you know, I show it to them, they're going to run with it, you know, of course, right? Right.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting them for pizza and pitching it to them. And mind you, I hadn't been there in a couple of years. And he shot me down, and I was crushed.
Oh man,
you know what I mean? I was crushed. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't think it has teeth? You know what I mean? I don't think we can do anything with it. And the sole reason I did it was because I had seen my mentor. I'd started doing conventions, just, you know, haunting conventions, and I'd seen my mentor, and we were catching up. How things are Star Tunes, blah blah blah. Oh, yeah, and back then, the studios made their money, even though we had won Emmys for the stuff we did for Warner Brothers, right? We had won several Emmy Awards. They weren't our properties. Keep that in mind, right? And so those studios only stayed afloat by selling original IPs to larger entities and getting licensing for them, right? Now, mind you, while I'm there, as an intern, granted, not a whole lot of, you know, credit and experience, but what I've always was a fan of the medium, right? I was like the every fan. My taste was pervasive. Okay, if it moved and somebody drew it, I watched it and I picked it apart, right? And so I saw the stuff that they were pitching, the IPs, and quite frankly, they were horrible. I'm like, no one's going to watch this, right? And sure enough, nothing was catching. And so when my mentor caught me at a con, we caught up and he said, yeah, they're in dire straits financially, XYZ. He said, what about that thing you were working on? Maybe. I said, okay. And so that's when I got the meeting. I said, well, yeah, I'd be willing to, if they're willing to go with it, let's see what they think. And they shot it down. And so I said, okay, I'm very competitive, right? I'm an ex-pro basketball player. Played overseas.
Nice. There you go.
Military. I'm not wired to lose.
Right.
Almost to my detriment. You know, you ever see that comic with Wonder Woman? What was it when she was fighting? When it was Prometheus Tower of Babel, right?
Yeah,
and her weakness is that she'll never give up. She'll die, right? She'll burn. That's kind of me, right? And just put her in a never-ending battle, and she'll end up killing herself, right?
Right. And
so I said, okay. And at that time, I think Underworld had just come out, right?
Yeah.
And I'd seen Kevin Grievous at a con, and I heard his story. I was like, okay, I can do this as a comic. I get tax refund. I can do this, right? You know. And so I started really learning the comic stuff. And you know, granted, I was a lay fan prior to that. You know, I was a lay fan. I really didn't really collect, or you know what I mean. I was kind of in and out. Animation was my real thing, but comics were animation adjacent. Right? There's that word again, adjacent. You got a reward that you can give everybody for when I say adjacent.
Yeah.
Make our listeners, they take
I never had an opportunity to use that word. I have to dig for one. It's here.
Adjacent. So you know, so I started learning comics, and that's where the nickname Solo came from, right? Because I knew that, you know, just culturally speaking, let's just, you know, call a spade a spade. I'm a 6'1", physically fit Black man. And I really wanted editors to feel at ease to give me really harsh critiques. So I started going to cons, acting as my own agent. Hello, my name is DR Perry. Hey, listen, this is my artist named Solo, man. He's trying to bring it to the industry. Tell us what you think. You know, so they didn't know the guy was standing in front of them, looming, waiting for a response.
Right.
So, so that was actually my MO. I would tell them, you know, that I'm DR Perry, this is an artist Solo, blah, blah, blah.
And so kind of fake it till you make it, right? That kind of thing.
Faked it till I made it, man.
Yeah.
And so, you know, eventually I got my skills up enough to whereas I felt confident to do my own book. You know, I tell my students, my barometer was, and this is how I encourage people to look at critiques, right? When you stop getting critiques and start getting business cards, you're ready.
Yeah,
when
that's
you go
good.
to an editor and he got nothing to say, and he's like, give me a call. Right? I can put you on the book. And for me, it was a guy named Eddie Berganza, who at the time was the editor-in-chief of Superman. Wow. That gave me my first offer. And that's another story. I won't bore you with that. I'm famous for the wrong reasons in that circle.
It might be a good story. Maybe that's what we want to hear.
All right, so you said this is prequel, right? So okay. All right, so when I was doing the cons and really avidly trying to learn the industry inside and out, you know, how it worked, what the money looked like, you know, the pipeline of comics creation, who the printers and publishers were, you know, everything. It was a span for about 6 or 7 years, right? That I was just immersing myself into the culture, just trying to what do fans like, why do they like it, you know, from indie to the big three, right? And so at this time, I had developed, you know, a little circle. You know, you make friends. So they're coming into Chicago. Back then it was Wizard World. That was the big one. You know, here in Chicago, Wizard World, before it became a flea market. Before CP2 killed it, right? But back then it was Wizard World Chicago. And it was a bunch of us now. We'd been, and I won't mention any names, but they're all heavy hitters at Marvel and DC now. You know, but I'm proud to call them friends. Regardless. Yeah. And so we were walking around the con, and we were following one brother in particular, who's a really good friend of mine, who's actually a toy designer. You know, he's a award-winning toy designer, and he's worked in animation and stuff. And at the time, he was like the alpha of that crew. You know what I mean? He was actually doing industry work. getting paid. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't a name, but he broke through the bubble, right? And we're following him around. And at this time, Todd McFarlane was at the height of his game. Okay, this is when Spawn the movie was coming out. HBO had the animated show. You remember that, right?
Yeah, definitely. The animated show was great.
This is when Todd was killing it, right? And so he had been doing covers and pinups for Todd, and they were buying them, right? And they were appearing in his books. And I don't know if you guys remember, if you remember, check out the documentary on Amazon about Image. Todd was paying ridiculous.
I saw that.
He was paying ridiculous cash, man.
Yeah.
He was putting out them stacks.
Like a year's salary per book kind of thing, right?
Bro, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it until I saw it, okay? My guy had told me, he had told me, and I was like, I knew he was getting to work, but I didn't believe the money till I saw it. And so what happened was we're walking around the con, and this Caucasian gentleman with a beard walks up, and it's Bo Smith. I don't know if you guys know who Bo Smith is, but he's a big name now in Hollywood. Winona Earp. He's the executive producer of Winona Earp now.
Gotcha.
Right. And so Bo Smith, at the time, he was like Todd's right-hand man. Okay. He was like Todd McFarlane's right-hand guy. And that's the one who my buddy had dealt with all this time. And so here he just saunters up. I hear this country drawl. Turns out he's from West Virginia. Same place that my partner in our studios is from. He's from West Virginia as well. And so he's like, "Oh, come on, man, show us what you got, so you can see if Todd wants some stuff." And so he pulls us behind, for lack of a better term, it's called the velvet rope, right? You know how the pros can go. So he takes us to this like sequestered area at the con, and it's like 5 or 6 of us in this group, and we're just following because we're about to see something, right? We're about to see something happen, right? And so he opens up the portfolio of my bud, and he's flipping. And he said, "Okay, send that to Todd, send that to Todd, send that to Todd." And all I'm doing is because at the time he was paying anywhere between $1,500 to $2,500 per pinup.
Wow.
Per.
Yeah, that's like $5,000 today's money, maybe more, right? So
right.
Yeah.
And consider what a cover artist today if he's a top tier guy, may make $400 or $500.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the scale that hasn't really shifted in all that time of the standard, right? If you're like a Jim Lee or Scott Campbell, you may get $500, right? And so all I'm doing. Everyone else is like, I'm just counting the cash. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? And so it turns out I'm standing a little too close, and he looks at me and he says, "Hey, bud, what you got there?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "Nothing you'd be interested in." And it was nothing I didn't think he'd be interested in, because it was just my stuff, right? I brought it to work on it while in that con energy of some free time, right? I was past getting critiques. I was actually starting to work on the property, right? So it was nothing that he would recommend. There was no Batman, there was no Superman, there was no Spawn, there was no nothing, right? There was a couple of pages from an indie book that I'd been commissioned to do, but that was pretty much it. And it was like a rinky-dink indie company, right? And so he says, "Go ahead, Solo, man, show him your stuff." So I hand him my portfolio, and he's sitting there and he's quiet. He's flipping. He says, He said, hands my portfolio back. He says, "Here's what I want you to do." He said, "I want you guys to go over to the DC booth." He says, "You're going to see a short, Weasley little guy with a beard and glasses wearing a Superman shirt. Go up to him and tell him both sent you." And so, I'm a South Side kid from Chicago. I'm not really good with taking orders from people I don't know, right? Especially when they're very assertive like that, right? And so, mind you, we had just passed the DC booth, and they were doing portfolio reviews, and the line was wrapped around the freaking convention center. And I literally said, "No, thank you. I'm not standing in that line, man. It's too long." And he immediately called an attitude with me. It kind of impressed me, but also kind of pissed me off a little bit. I think I was a little bit more impressed than pissed off, right? And he flexed right back at me. He says, "No, man, you're not listening. I didn't tell you to stand in line. I told you to walk up to the table and tell them Bo sent you. That's all you have to do."
That's
all right. Right. So the whole crew, we go up to the DC booth. We see the line. We're walking past the line, and literally, it's ridiculous. All these, these hopeful artists are waiting to get their stuff critiqued by. and the people at DC. And so we walk up, and there's a security there standing behind, and my guy speaks up, because he's the man, right? He speaks up, Bo sent us. They lean in the guy's ear. The guy looks, he's in mid portfolio review. He just hands it to the guy next to him and turns his back on the crowd and waves us over. And you hear this cascade of murmurs and cursings going down the line. Like, you know what I mean? Right? And I'm like, man, we're about to start a riot up in here, right? And so we go behind there, and he's like, come on, hurry up. I don't have much time. Show me what you got. And so my guy opens up his portfolio, and he's an incredible artist, mind you. And he immediately starts ripping him a new one. What the heck? What? Rip that off. Seen that in a book. I mean, he's just butchering this dude. I don't know what's going on here. What's all this posturing? You get what I'm saying? I'm like, wow. So I look at Warren. Warren is my partner on the studios, and you got to understand, Warren's like 6'7", and he's a really skinny white dude. We make a really odd couple, right? He kind of looks like Abe Lincoln.
It's kind of like
right?
John and I.
Right.
We're not a couple.
Like Abe Lincoln with a habit, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I look at Warren. I said, man, let's go, man. I said, because if he talked to me like that, man, we could be moving furniture up in here, bro. I was like, I'm not doing this. You know what I'm saying? He talking to my guy like that, And so, and Warren's like, so just chill. And so I'm getting really anxious. And he goes to my next buddy. Now, this dude he's a major hitter that shall remain nameless in the industry. He does the same thing to him. And I'm like, I know I don't stand a chance, right? I know I don't stand a chance. And so finally he says, come on, man, hurry up. I don't have all day. And so he just literally snatches my portfolio, right? And he starts thumbing through it, and he's quiet. And he's not saying anything. And my heart is about to jump out of my chest. You dig what I'm saying? And mind you, I dodge bullets for a living at this point. I'm a tree cop. I'm 24 years old. You know what I'm saying? I'm
former military, right? Yeah.
I'm military. I'm nervous about this little 5'0" dude wearing glasses and what he's going to say next, right?
Right.
And so after he gets finished, all he's going to say, and that's all he's doing, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And as I tell my students, I'm very pragmatic about where I am at any given moment, right? I'm not delusional. I don't do it with my kids. I don't do it with my grandkids. I was by far not the best artist, right? But my strength has always been storytelling, right? Visual storytelling. And after he got finished, he looked at the other guys and he said, now see this guy, I can work with him. And he gave me his card. He said, call me. Wow. And I was like, we were all like, you know what I'm saying? And the funny thing was, I never wanted to work in the industry. That was never my goal. I just wanted to know I was good enough. That's all I wanted to know, that I was good enough. Because, during my studies of the industry, I would see that top tier artists, it's like whoever's the flavor of the month. They'd be at the top of their game one year, and then some new 20-year-old comes, and then they're in Artist Alley begging you to buy a print. And I'm like, I didn't want that to be me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, that didn't seem right to me. You know what I mean? This guy sold you millions of books, a few months ago, and now some other dude comes, and a few years later, he's like, want to print? I'll sign it for free. That didn't appeal to me. You know what I'm saying? And so I said, I didn't want to play that game. And so my claim to fame is the guy who turned down an opportunity to work on Superman.
Awesome.
So
well, all has a place, right? Do you think, Solo, when you were in the service, do you think that influenced your art? Like, I'm a big EC Comics fan, obviously, with my shirt. So I was thinking of like Frontline Combat. Harvey Kurtzman came, he took a lot of that imagery from the service and the war, and even Jack Kirby, right, and translated into his art. How do you feel that may have influenced your art coming back when you said about visual storytelling? Do you think that somehow, because you were living that?
It didn't influence my drawing. It influenced my writing.
Okay.
Like, I became very enamored with, like, most kids from Chicago never make it out their neighborhood, man. Their whole world is like a 3, 4, 5 block radius. My wife works for a nonprofit, and I've mentored kids for years. And I have had kids that are from the city that have never seen their own downtown.
Wow.
Yeah.
They've never seen downtown Chicago.
And it's beautiful. I was there, so I think it's
They've
beautiful.
never seen it. And so when I got a chance to break water, and I was just enamored by the diversity of stories, you know what I mean? And experiences that I'm like, my world just kind of exploded. I'm like, this is what the world really is. It's people like this, you know what I mean? This is how people can live and be happy, or be, you know, it was the actual stories and the experiences that I brought with me, you know what I mean, that have affected my narrative. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can get that. Once you get out in the world, man, it's like you realize I was blessed to be able to travel. I did some humanitarian work and those kind of things, and you realize that ultimately everybody's the same. They have their plot of land, people they love and care about, friends, family. They just want to be left alone, right, and get by. That's every country. They're like, just give me my little plot. I want to have enough to get by and just be chill. And, same dreams, same hopes for their kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's so easy to vilify people when you really don't know where they come from. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You know? Sure. And so like I'm a little black boy, and I'm in Spain, I'm in Italy, because now I played basketball for the US Armed Forces. So I'm in Spain, I'm in Italy, I'm in Korea, I'm in Japan, right? And mind you, I'm only 19. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? I'm like, my world was forever altered. You know, I even came back to my hood with just a totally different perspective. And I really wanted to know, you know, I started exploring what things tie us together. And I found out that more things tie us together than separate us.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't realize that.
Yeah. Did you ever get to go to Brazil with like
I never got to go to Brazil. I was warned never to go to Brazil. Because
okay.
I told her that if I go to Brazil, I'll probably end up being divorced.
Many countries inside the country here. It's like we have like dozens of different countries in here. It's
I believe
crazy.
it.
We
I had some of my buddies that went
language. Oh, really?
Yeah, I had some of my buddies that went there, and they were like, "Solo, don't go to Brazil. Like you're gonna fall in love every 5 minutes. You could."
Oh yeah, you would. Yeah, definitely would. Yeah. And I was watching some of your programs earlier on today, and I see that you're really in love with teaching, and I know that you're a self-taught guy. Like you didn't take lessons, you did all on your own. Like you learned just by trying and making mistakes, correcting them, and now you teach. How did that came about? Like what was the what was the motivation behind it? Was that because now you have a grandson that is very interested in what you do, or is there any other reason you have become a teacher?
That's a great question, man. You're forcing me to think. I came up here with the script of what I was going to touch on. But,
that's what happens here. We go down all kinds of rabbit holes.
Rogerio does this to our guests. He puts them on. He puts
That's why he's here. That's why he's here.
He's like, dig deep. No,
I have to earn my job here.
You do it well.
Thank you.
No, what got me into teaching, believe it or not, was my own experience with learning. Being a cop and raising a family, I have 4 children. They're all adults. And times were hard for us. So I didn't have the luxury of paying for education. And when social media became a thing, I saw the options that were available, and none of them quite quenched my thirst for learning. Case in point, the people that I wanted to learn from, I couldn't afford. Right? The ones that were really good, I couldn't afford what they were doing. I'm like, I don't have $200 to $300 a month. Right? So what does that do? That forces me to YouTube. But what am I not getting on YouTube? I'm not getting interaction. I'm not getting feedback. Right? You understand? I'm watching and I can mimic, but I'm not getting any real time, crucial information coming from a knowledgeable source. And then, like everybody else, I bought what I could afford. The $20 a month course, the $30 a month course, and I outgrew those very fast. And I'm like, okay, is there a way to do this better? Right. And so it was very important for me to create options for people that were like me, right? Very limited on time, Like I would be in, like, the reason I created the app, believe it or not, that was a pain point for me, because we're talking South Side Chicago, aka one of the murder capitals of the United States. And I always worked in the hood. I always worked midnights, which is when everything happens, right? The night shift. And so when I would get a lunch break, a rare lunch break or some quiet time, I would probably only have 20 minutes, right? And I would have to spend 10 minutes figuring out what I wanted to sketch. Right. And so I'm like, this is eating into my time. Right. Or if I wanted to watch something, I would watch it, and at the same time trying to listen to the radio to make sure I don't miss what's happening in the street. You understand?
Yeah.
And so what got me into teaching was, I'm like, I wanted to answer real problems with real people trying to learn on a budget, with family, with real responsibilities, and meet their desire to learn. So I'm actually creating the courses for me, if that makes sense.
Sure it does. Yeah.
I'm making them for me. The actual teaching part of it, I think, our purpose finds us when you're paying attention. I've always been in a teaching position because I'm an avid learner. I read 4 books a month, nonfiction, right? Nice. I taught myself every illustrative program, every animation program. I'm an avid learner. And so those usually are the ones that are, and when people ask me questions, I like to have the answer. You know what I mean? I don't like saying, you know what, let me get back to you. Right. I like to be able to say with confidence, here's what's going to help you get to where you want to go. And so when it came time for me to retire, I had opportunities. I still have opportunities. I'm vetting some now from the big 2. But it's funny because I'm really conflicted, because on one hand, of course, it helps my brand, right? You know what I mean? Sure. It helps Ka-Pow, and it adds legitimacy to Honor Studios to say, ooh, DC artist, ooh, Marvel artist, right? Yeah. But at the same token, I really like it when I see light bulbs go off. You know what I mean? When I see my students get it, like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. You know what I mean? Or that makes so much sense. So it's either be a cog in somebody else's machine that really doesn't need me, right? Or think about it. Almost transformative impacts in our lives are usually someone that was in a teaching position, whether it be a coach, a pastor, right? A teacher at school. We all remember that great teacher that made us feel we could do anything. You know what I mean? I'm like, so I could go here and just be another artist in their pipeline, that will get pushed aside in a couple of years. Or I could build something and people say, I learned this from this guy named Solo, and my life has never been the same. I chose option B.
Yeah, that's awesome. Charity lasts forever too, right? So that's a big thing, right?
Yeah. Do you think that's like making amends to your younger self? Like you're doing something that you would like to get from someone, and now you have the opportunity to do it. Yeah,
absolutely. And to build on that, you brought something I really would be remiss if I didn't mention. My wife works for a nonprofit that helps disenfranchised kids in the hood have opportunities to go to college. Right? It's called 3 Seas Mentoring, and she's worked there for a few years through a friend of mine that hired her. And so every year we take a bunch of college potential kids from their bubble, and we take them on college tours. Now, we weren't able to do this past year because of COVID, right? Yeah. But I remember the first time we went, and I went as a chaperone, right? Because I'm a cop, and we got 30 kids, and they want to make sure the kids were safe. And so my wife asked me, they paid me, of course. I didn't mind that. But I remember we arrived at the hotel after the road trip, and I just take out my iPad. Now, I'm not doing it for attention, right? I'm just going to doodle some stuff. Now, we have 30 kids, and these are all low income, first generation. Parents have never been to college. You understand? Most are below the poverty line. We're just trying to expose them that college is a possibility. And I start doodling. And before I know it, 10 of the 30 kids are around me. And they all want to show me their artwork. And now, mind you, 30 kids, a third of them, and they were incredible artists. And they were like, I want to be an artist, but everyone say be a graphic designer, commercial artist, the well-intended loved ones that really don't have the information, and that's the closest equation they have is commercial artists, graphic design, right? Because they, of course, they want you to be able to make money, but that's all they know, right? And I'm like, why would you do that when you can make a living doing this? And when I would see them, they're like, you can make money drawing the Flash. You can make money drawing Goku. You know what I mean? You like anime, you can make money doing that. And so every year we had that same experience. And now the next few years, I started breaking out my art just to see who could draw, right? You understand?
Yeah.
I remember one year I took them to the Microsoft store. Right, because we went to the mall at the last day to get to go to the mall, spend their money, right? And I took a group of them to the Microsoft store, and I got on the big Surface Pro, the big one, right? They had never seen a digital art tool before, and I'm like, I told my wife, I said, this is what I think I want to do. So we're actually launching a derivative of Ka-Pow called Ka-Pow Comic Arts, which it's going to be a nonprofit operating under grants to introduce disenfranchised kids with artistic potential to the comic craft, to the actual comic craft, because many of them don't know that it's an option, but they're incredibly talented. A lot of my buddies, to test the viability, there's a guy named Carlos Mendoza. Check him out on Instagram, Carlos Mendoza III. He's an incredible artist. He's worked on SpongeBob, done stuff for Nickelodeon. He's a toy designer of the year several times. Really good brother, really good friend of mine. But when I was bouncing it off of Carlos, he was like, Solo, that's my story too. He's a Latino kid, grew up, in the hood, and he was doing graffiti. Now he's one of the top toy designers because somebody stumbled across him and said, hey, you can do this. You know what I mean? And it just opened up his world. You understand? Yeah. And I'm like, how many kids like us are out there?
Right.
You know what I mean? That don't know that this is an option. They see the stuff in Marvel. They see the stuff on the screen. They see the toys on the shelves. And they don't realize somebody's drawing. Somebody's getting paid to draw.
We talk about that all the time.
That's like my biggest thing.
Yeah.
I'm just like, if your friends look at you, where you're like, yeah, I'm working on a comic book, and then they're like, oh, like not, it's nothing. It's like who do you think makes the movies you watch? Who do you think writes the books you read? Like, there's people like us that want to do that, and you gotta realize that you just need the opportunity and the stage to do it. And so that's awesome that you're doing that. That's super cool.
Yeah. So prayers, welcome. So we're opening up the nonprofit. We're about to file the papers and, file for the tax-free exempt status. And we're actually looking at locations, so Ka-Pow, the Comic Art Academy, is the for-profit. That's the stuff that you see on YouTube and the online courses that I'm launching and my app. And then it's Ka-Pow Comic Arts, which is the nonprofit. And it just appalled me when I realized, because I did a study. I did some research, and I found it was actually a study done by UCLA, I believe. And when I saw the percentage of the low percentage of people of color in the quote unquote entertainment arts is less than 5%. And I'm like, and I'm looking at all these incredible young artists, that are in the hood. I'm like, these kids got skills. They just don't have the education. You know what I mean? They just don't have the knowledge that they can do this. You know what I'm saying? They're just doing it to escape, like all of us do. We all got into it for what? Escapism.
Right.
Exactly.
Makes me think there was a documentary out. It was called, I don't know if you saw it, it's called The Beautiful Losers.
I didn't see it.
It was all about fringe, I guess I call them artists, but I think of graffiti artists and all these other guys. And all these major brands were connecting with those guys because they wanted them to design, marketing campaigns for Nike, for Apple, put graphics on a skateboard. And they got this, it's been a little while since I saw the doc. I just pulled it up to make sure. Yeah, it's called The Beautiful Losers, not but Beautiful Losers. And I think they got flown. I'm trying to remember again. I apologize, I haven't seen it in a while. They got flown to Japan or so to film something about this documentary. But these remind me, like you were saying about these kids. They're just again. I grew up in that circuit. I was latchkey kid, punk rock, skateboard dude. Yeah. Right, just we're spray painting on trains, doing all that stuff. Right, that's what we did. Right. But now they're making some bank, like you're saying, just doing what they love. And I always say that too. I'm like, take anything that you're passionate about, man, and latch your claws into that, because somebody's doing that and they're getting paid to do that. Like maybe you like to shoot bow and arrow, that's your thing. You know, people are getting paid big money to shoot bow and arrow. Anything you can think of, you just got to figure out how to get on that train and ride that success. So that's a really important thing.
Easy.
Yeah,
and
sure does.
That's the thing I try to teach my students. Like we're just adding a third year to the comics program at the School of Comics. And actually the third year is my creation, and it's to prep them for after you learn how do you earn?
Right.
You dig exactly. And social media has broken down I wish Susan was still here, because I remember like when I launched Art in Studios, all right. So this is what happened when I launched on. I was not ready. When I tell you I wasn't ready, I didn't calculate it right. I'm not. I was not ostentatious. I was not. I did not think that it will be well received. Right. I really set a very low bar metric for success. And so what happened was when I launched it, it got more traction than I was prepared for, because I was just a guy who wanted to draw and write. That's it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I'm flying out I remember New York. I flew to LA. I flew to Texas, and I was meeting with investors. I met with 2 video game companies. One was a representative of Sony for PlayStation for the property. Right. And mind you, I'm so out of my league here. I'm just being honest. I was so out of my league. I didn't know half the stuff that was being said around me. Right. And I remember I was invited to speak at a convention in Portland, and I'm speaking, and these 2 very mature Caucasian men, one was about 6'5", and the other one was like about 5'6", and they walk up to me and they invite me out to dinner. Right. Nothing impressive about these guys. They pick me up at my hotel, Escalade, nothing too fancy, Expedition, Ford Expedition, nothing too fancy, right? Rental car. And they say, order whatever you want on the menu. So we're sitting there talking, and it turns out, long story short, one guy, you can Google him. His name is John DeMargaretti. He's kind of like the father of massive multiplayer online gaming in Australia, billionaire. The other guy's name was, no, he's a billionaire. I'm having dinner with these guys, right? The other guy's name was, I'm having a mental fart. Gerald Broussard. Gerald Broussard, billionaire, Texas contractor, Kingwood Cable. I'm having dinner with these guys, and they want to talk to me about War in Paradise, right? In Honor Studios. Turns out they were men of the faith, just like me, and they loved my idea. They'd read the article on me in the Sun-Times that Sun-Times called me the Christian version of Marvel Comics, which was a great compliment, right? And I'm sitting there talking, and he just broke it down to me. He says, you really don't know what you're doing. I'm like, I don't. Like, I can talk. Right? I can talk. I can run game. I'm like, but I really don't. They saw right through it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And Gerald was very old school because he had built his wealth. You know what I mean? And we would meet this is another mentor. We would meet once a week on a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You know somebody's important when they hand you their business card and all that's on it is their name.
You'll find me. You know how to get me.
A name and an email. That's it. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, you must be the man. Because all was like a name and an email. Right?
Yeah.
So
I'm learning tonight. I'm going to do this.
Like, if you look at my card, I got all this information on there.
So you arrive when it just says solo. You're just like,
here's
bam.
My tax ID number, my social security number.
I'm just going to display heels. That's it.
Exactly. And so but he took me on his wing, and that's when I really started learning the business of business. You know what I mean? He had me do an entire business plan. And it's funny because he made this proposal to me, and I didn't know it was a test, but apparently I passed it. He said, all right, you got 2 options in front of you. He said, I know you're looking for an angel investor. He said, I can either invest and get you the money and get started, or I can teach you what I know. And I said, teach me what you know.
Yeah.
You know, and nice. Because I'd already had all these meetings, and I realized I was in over my head. You dig what I'm saying? I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know about profits and loss and projections and competitive.
Oh yeah, all that fun stuff. Yeah,
I knew none of that stuff, dude. And so for the better part of several months, and we actually became very close. We've lost contact. I just reached out to him again recently, but it was invaluable for me to learn the business side of it, right? And he actually nurtured me through my very first business plan. Now granted, with social media, you really don't need a business plan as much. It doesn't carry as much weight. But this was pre-Instagram, pre-YouTube, where you still had to go through gatekeepers to get money. Right now with crowdfunding and, crowdsourcing, all that stuff, the gates are wide open if, you can build an audience, right, and substantiate your product through public opinion.
Sure.
But then it was very much, how do you get access to a guy's bank account? Give him a plan. Right. And how he's going to get paid. And
right.
So, but, even though, that is not the, I want to say now the intermediate way of doing it, because you still got to do that once you go to the higher levels. You know what I mean? That still is necessary. But now you can raise $200,000 on Kickstarter. You can raise, $500,000 on Indiegogo. You know what I mean? You can go to WeFunder, right, and get, class tier C funding, investing, all that other, stuff. And so, but it was crucial for my learning curve in what I'm doing now. You understand? So I think a lot of artists, once again, if she's listening, we need what you're doing, girl.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Angelo says he got our first comic today and he loves it. So that's awesome. Angelo's a good dude.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Take us through your school a little bit, Solo. Is it do people have to have like a base skill of drawing when they come to you, or do you take somebody that has like no skill and teach them like how to draw? Or talk to us a little bit about that. So if people are listening, they want to know kind of what like the entry point is to approach someone like yourself to start the school.
Okay, well, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to have an offering for everyone, no matter where they were at, right? Really, with me, because I take my investment seriously. Like, you should have seen last portfolio reviews at the school. I was brutal. I'm serious, man, because some of those cats are just wasting my time. I'm like, I don't care about your money. I take pride in you doing well as a feather in my cap. You understand? And so, but what I'm really big on is really meeting people where they are, right? And nurturing through the process. And so you don't have to have any real skill, just a real desire to learn. Because this is what I tell everyone. Drawing itself is a taught skill. It's formulaic. Drawing itself is a taught skill. Okay? It's anatomy. It's perspective. It's physics. It's light, right? It's color, right?
Sure,
you understand?
Right. Yeah.
What's hard to teach is creativity, right? And what I'd like to do is I demystify everything. I don't like sounding lofty. You know what I mean? I'm gifted with a vocabulary, but I really like people to get it, because it doesn't make sense if people don't understand what you're freaking saying, right? And you're just trying to make yourself seem smarter than what you are. Okay. So I'm like, I try to make it as palatable and as digestible as possible. So what I tell all my students is creativity is nothing more than information brokering. And I didn't even come up with that term. I found it in Stronger, Better, Faster, an incredible book. And when I read about it, the guys at Pixar and Disney, it really is, creativity comes from your ability to curate ideas and thoughts from pre-exposed experiences. Mm-hmm. That's it. Stuff that you've seen before. Everything comes from something. That's science. Everything comes from something.
Exactly.
Right. Everything. Right. Every style that you see, every composition that you see, every new idea, it's not new. It's something that's been innovated or curated and compiled from various things, right? And just redistributed to the world, right? And so what I teach my students is I can't teach you how to recompile it, right? But what I can teach you is how to see. I can teach you how to see. Step number one is learning how to see.
Yeah.
Not just to look at it, but what are you looking at and what is it doing in front of your eyes?
Yeah, I think that's really important.
It is. It's crucially important. You know what I mean? Because a lot of artists are like, oh, creativity, like I've gotten this my entire life. Your creativity is a gift. I'm like, no, it's not a gift. I was gifted with a 168 IQ. That was a gift, right?
Right.
I was tested when I was 8. That's the gift, my ability to process information.
Sure.
But the ability to put it together and make sense of what I see and try to reformulate it and regurgitate it back to you in a way that feels different and pushes buttons what's inside of you, that's study. That's just study. You understand? You know, and so what I like to tell people is drawing, we can get past that. You know, one of the things that I learned, because I've only taught at the School of Comics for this past year, right? And I actually took that because my buddy, who's a world famous illustrator, he's actually my cover artist. His name is Douglas Klauba, an incredible, he's in the Illustrators Hall of Fame. And I'm sure Susan probably knows his work, right? But he's local here. And he and I have been best friends. He was the first guy to volunteer to partner with Honor Studios. Like, I want to work with you. You know, I was like, I can't afford you. He said, it doesn't matter. I want to love what you're doing.
That's nice.
And so we've been best friends ever since, right? And so Doug called me when I retired from the police department and says, hey, we have an opening here at the School of Comics. I think, you know, since you're launching Ka-Pow, you know, come see what a formal, educated program looks like. Invaluable. For me, it's information, right? And so I started with the School of Comics, and I was very intimidated. I'll be honest with you, because and granted, if it's not intimidating, then you're not pushing yourself. I tell everybody that. It's not about being afraid, but it's about being unfamiliar, right? You know, in a formal teaching setting was unfamiliar to me. I hadn't been to college. You know, I've been in classroom type settings with police and military, but not formal, you know, education, you know, structure, you know, of any real legitimacy. And so he's like, no, come and learn. You know, I met with the director. You know, she knew that I was launching Ka-Pow, so that I wanted to make sure there was no conflict of interest. You know, she's like, no, you know, and it turned out that some students had requested me because I was invited to speak once, and my speech was supposed to be 20 minutes. It ended up being 2 hours because they kept asking questions. And that's, you know, she's like, no, we want Solo to come teach when the opening came. Right. And so I've been there, and since being there, I realized that the worst thing you can do is assume what people know. Right. Especially as artists, you know, and I'm sure you guys are all pros and accomplished in your own right. But every artist that I know worth his salt is always open to a new way of doing things. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter what I know. Joel, what do you know?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? John, how do you write? What's your process?
Yeah.
You dig what I'm saying? Rios, how do you break down a page? How are you seeing this light? Why are you choosing those lines? I want to know. You understand? Doesn't mean I'm going to mimic it, but there might be a nugget there that I can co-opt, right? That levels me up just a little bit further in my own thing. And so when the opportunity came to teach there, I jumped at it. And he's like, well, don't you know how to say it? It doesn't matter how much it pays. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, because I'm getting information that I can't put a price tag on, right? And I'm going to see if I'm actually any good at it. I want to see if I'm good at the teaching thing. I'd rather see if I'm good at it on their dime than my dime. You understand what I'm saying? You know, so what I came to realize is that as I started teaching, here's another thing. I came on the heels of reputable teachers. I'm talking about people that are like Eisner Award winners.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. That was heavy. Right. I'm like, they won 2 Eisners and they just quit. I'm like, oh wow, I gotta fill that spot. No pressure. Seriously. I'm like, wow. Yeah. And so I came in very intimidated. You know, one of the students, she's actually a doctor, right? She's a doctor. Her and her husband have a very successful practice. And that's why I love people from all walks, right? A doctor.
Sure.
You know, she's my age, you know what I mean? And she, you know, and she's like, she wants to learn. But she actually inboxed me privately after like my third class, after the third week. And she said, Solo, quit apologizing. Right. I would always pre-qualify with an apology because I wasn't certain if I was being redundant or meeting the standard of the person that came in front of me. You know what I mean? I'm sorry if this doesn't make sense. I'm sorry if I'm not saying this right. And I got quiet. I'm like, I am apologizing. He said, just teach, just teach.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it how they do it. You know what I mean? These other people had been to art school that preceded me, so I'm doubting my legitimacy, if I'm being completely transparent, right? I'm doubting my legitimacy. And turns out that it was my illegitimacy that attracted them to me. This is because you are like us. You raised a family and you leveled up to this ability. You know what I mean? You worked 6 nights a week on the streets and still had court in the morning and kids to school and car bills. Like, you're like us. You didn't go to art school like them. That's why we want you to teach us. How did you do that?
Yeah.
And
that's a big juggle, man.
Liability was my advantage, because they felt like they could relate to me. And so it's been a great experience.
Yeah.
That's great. So obviously, coming from the writing side of things, I definitely would love to pick your brain. But if you could give, really any tips for new writers. I mean, Joel read my first comic script, and comic script was pasting from my I was trying to turn it into a novel initially, and I was copy and pasting to him initially. So since then I took a class from Neil Gaiman through master class. I read.
I heard that was great, by the way.
It was awesome. There was only one section on comic. There was one chapter on comics, but it was awesome. Like, the way he opened your brain. But what tips would you give to new writers when it comes to putting a comic script together from beginning to end, knowing that taking an idea and making it something?
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah,
that's what I give every writing writers. A little bit of myself. I was a writer before I started drawing. I used to write as a kid. I was an avid reader, always as a kid, and words were my strength. Okay. It wasn't until I got a little bit older, 8 or 9, that I wanted to put pictures to those words. Right.
You don't lose that.
Yeah. You don't lose that. Right. And so, but what I've learned, even from my own mistakes, is keep it simple. Right. A lot of times, new writers overcomplicate a very valid idea with trying to be too clever. You understand what I'm saying? One of my favorite writers, believe it or not, and I see why his stuff gets picked up all the time by in license, is Mark Miller. If you ever read his writing, it's very simple. He keeps the main thing, right? Like, granted, Jupiter's Legacy got canceled after 1 season. I see why, because they broke the formula. But if you actually read the book, he doesn't muddle it with a bunch of geek details. Now, I'm not saying geek to be insulting. I'm saying geek in the sense that excessive stuff that we want to know all the minutia and the micro. You understand? What are their powers? How did they get them? Where do they come from? What makes them different? The stuff that he kept the main thing, which was the family dynamic. You understand? And human nature, right?
No mumbo jumbo.
All the mumbo jumbo. And so what I tell writers, keep it simple. Keep it simple, because if you confuse them, you lose them, and that's real easy to do. A lot of times you want to impress people, right? But keep it simple and be authentic. Don't write about something you don't know.
Yeah.
Seriously, because I think in today's age, more so than any other generation in history, today's audience is very well informed. And if they don't know it, they have access to it at the click of a button. You know what I mean? Right. If you don't know it, don't speak it. Don't put it to print. Keep it, stay authentic. That would be my big 2.
That's
keep
great.
It simple and stay authentic.
When I was writing the Deadball script to give to Ruggiero, it takes place in the 1910s. So when you talk about don't write what you don't know, I wasn't born then. I just know stuff that I've read, right? But so I had to change some stuff up, because you research, like you said, click of a button, you Google search it. I'm like, I had the commentators announcing the baseball game, and then it just clicked in my head. I'm like, were there commentators yet? So I looked it up, and I'm like, nope, they weren't there for another 20 years. So we got to change that up in the script. So So yeah, that's a great tip for newbies such as myself. We're new to the game, but we have a lot of indie people to watch us too. So
that's great, man. Yeah, keep it simple, man, and do your homework. Like I'm doing a period piece myself right now. It's actually a pitch. I've been blessed enough to have some buddies in my circle that are actually getting property sold to streaming services. And in their library, they don't have anything animation. And so they reached out like, yo, Solo, you're the animation guy. What you got in your library? I'm like, dude, that's all I got in my library. So I'm actually working on some pitch decks right now. And one of my properties it takes place in Victorian era, right? And I know nothing about it. But I know nothing about it. But the research is real. You understand?
Yeah.
Like, all right, what was the temperature of the time? What was the mood of the time? What were the politics of the time? What were the socioeconomic statuses? What were the gaps? What did they look like? You understand? And so I want to make sure that, granted, I may not be able to dot every I and cross every T, but I can make some really strong looking alpha characters. You know what I mean? And if you miss a dot here or there, you probably won't notice it, right? You understand? Yeah. But that comes from doing your due diligence. I always tell my students, treat every property. This was my mistake. This came from a bad learning curve, because I'm praying that I have the same opportunities I had when I first launched War in Paradise. I'm praying that it comes back around again. When I tell you it was insane, I had one mega church that shall remain nameless actually send a representative to my house in the hood. This guy was from South Africa, right? To try to get me to sign on with them, and they would fund my entire project. I didn't know anything that I was doing. So this comes from a pain point. Because when I wrote War in Paradise, believe it or not, it was a cast off. I had other properties that I was really into. This was like the low hanging fruit for me. But treat every property, every character, as if it has the potential to be huge. Like if you watch the Bill Watterson story, right, on Amazon Prime, Calvin and Hobbes were background characters in another strip.
Right. It was Opus. Was that Opus?
Yeah, I forget what it was. Yeah, I forget what it was.
Yeah, I think
they were background characters that the editor says, I don't like this strip, but you had that little kid with the tiger. What can you do with that? And seriously, you don't know. So he had to create this whole, and it became Calvin and Hobbes. You understand? You don't know what's going to resonate. And so I tell all my students, you don't have to go to the 10th degree, but take that character at least 5 or 6, even if it's a background character, right? Know that if somebody vibes with that, be willing and ready to swerve with that or with that story. You know what I mean? Don't sell it short.
That's great.
Yeah. Now you see a lot of background art that don't even have any faces, right? So you're talking, that's like volume 2, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Would you say that keeping it simple does translate to the actual physical art also, when you look at a complexity of a book or a panel, anything like that, or is that more on the storytelling side?
I think it's a very pervasive philosophy. Now, when I say keep it simple on the art side, I'm not saying that you don't being a master draftsman and a renderer will hurt you. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when it comes to the art side and keeping it simple, I guess the best way to make it more universal is to say clarity. Make sure that everything is clear, right? That everything is legibility. Because what we're talking about in this art form that merges two disparate forms of communication, visual and literary, right? Clarity is king. It still has to read. Okay. Does the art read clearly? Am I confused? Is the composition clear? I was so proud of myself this past year. And I think it comes, I'm going to toot my horn. Excuse me.
That's all right. No worries.
But as I started getting my confidence teaching the class, I realized that I knew more than I thought I knew. Why? Because I was self-taught, which means that I had to go deeper. You understand? As opposed to someone handing it to you. And mind you, I'm not knocking formal education. I put 3 kids through college, right? So I'm not knocking it, but there's something different. Like you said, you're a latchkey kid. So was I, right? We came from the generation your parents told you what, figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do I do it? Not figure it out.
Right.
That's all. So that was my mom's 3 figure it out. Figure it out. That's all. Figure it out. You're right. And so when you have that figured out mentality, what it forces you to do is dig deep. And oftentimes when you do so, you end up going further than you expected. You understand in the problem solving process. And so as I was teaching at the School of Comics, the feedback that I was getting from the students really did boost my confidence tremendously, because mind you, I'm on the heels of one multi-Eisner winning instructor and another dude has a huge social media following, right? And so they're telling me they never taught us this. Oh my gosh, I get it now. They never explained it that way. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay. I got this. Yeah, right. You understand what I'm saying? You know, and and as I started to reflect, because nothing passes by me without me really revisit everything, you know, in my quiet times. You know, I just like to reflect on days and interactions. Like, this is going to get a lot of my time as I'm on the road tomorrow. And as I reflected, I was like, you know, why did I go that far? It's because I had no one to tell me to stop.
Yeah,
no one
true.
said that's enough. You understand?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So it allowed me to explore deeper why my processes are the way that they are. You know?
Yeah.
So
I like it when people tell you can't too. That's a good motivator too. Like, oh, you'll never be able to do that. Right? Watch this, right?
Yeah. Barry, did you know that those letters together, D and R, means doctor in Portuguese, right? So
same in the US.
It's
a nice name, like a Dr. Perry. So Dr. Perry,
I get called that too, and I'm always correcting people. No, it's D period R period.
Like Dr. Perry is a great name, and I want to address you a question, which I think is very striking to me. Something about your personality. At the beginning of our conversation tonight, you mentioned that you were, firstly, you were a businessman who happened to be an artist. Okay? And then as we were talking along, I see that you have turned down some very business-like opportunities. And like you could have made some big bucks, and you just turn those opportunities down, and you follow your own bliss, right? And as all conversations we have here, like we want to learn from people that are more experienced than we are. And like, how are you artistically and commercially viable, even turning those kind of opportunities down, which I think is crazy? But I'm probably wrong, because you're here, right? Like, would you give us some tips? Because we want to quit our day jobs.
let me tell you something. First of all, I want to be perfectly clear that those declinations of opportunities, they were hard. Okay, they were really hard, especially when you look back on the years. When I look back, I was the first, and I say this unapologetically, I was the first of this crew to actually get industry work offered, right? And for my own personal convictions, I declined it. But years later, as I started seeing my buddies rise, though I was happy for them, it stung.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? You know, I'm seeing them produce volumes for Marvel and DC.
I have a band background. I had the same deal. Like, our guy got signed to Capitol. You know, it's like, damn. Like,
that's hard, man.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Hard.
I'm doing nothing. I'm washing dishes at a hospital. You know. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Bro, that is hard.
Yeah.
And we still communicate. They'll call me just to check up on me. You know, hey Solo, how's it going? You know, blah blah blah. They, you know, often call for my input on things, which lets me know they respect me, you know. But it was hard because it's always in the back of your skull. That should be me. That should be me, right? When I'm seeing them, when I'm looking at the big cons and, they're the guest artist featured and, working Blizzard and on the covers of magazines. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what I'm saying? That could be me. But here's how I balance that. Okay. I'm the only one that has a family, right? I was a young dad. I had my first kid when I was 18, right? None of them have kids, right? I couldn't do it because I needed medical. I knew that I get canceled from a book, I'm scrambling to get on another book. You know what I mean? And you guys know the industry, they'll cancel a book midstream if it's not selling. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm at a job with benefits. You know what I'm saying? My kids ain't got to work. I know what I'm getting every month. So these were the decisions. This was that pragmatic business sense for me at that time. But it was still hard, right? Because your heart wants what it wants. You understand what I'm saying? The heart wants what it wants. And so I've also been I'm a man of faith. I'm actually a licensed clergy, right? So I'm a man of I believe in reciprocity, and what God has for you is for you. And my life has reflected that. I've had enough situations where that has remained consistent and true, right? Quick story. I'm working security at a hospital when I get out of the military. I'm still in Kentucky. I just met my wife. She's pregnant. And mind you, I was a very lay comic fan. So I made a trip to a store, hadn't been in the store a while, and I'll never forget, the book I had was Solar, Man of the Atom, drawn by Barry Windsor Smith, right? Okay. And I'm sitting there, I know, right? I love Barry Windsor Smith. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just drawing what I see, like every artist, and I'm duplicating it line for line. Look, I'm on my post. I'm in the basement of the hospital where all the offices are. And I'm into it in my uniform. And all I hear is, it's supposed to be empty down there, right? Which is why I'm drawing. I'm not supposed to be drawing on duty. And there's this short little pudgy dude, and he says, "What are you doing there?" And I see the hospital badge, so I know he's like administration. I'm like, I'm about to get fired is what I'm doing here. Right? I'm about to get fired is what I'm doing here. And so he said, "Oh, that's interesting. Let me see." I said, it's Valiant. And this is how God has consistently worked in my life. He leaves and he comes back. I don't want to get up because it's in my drawer right behind me. I pull it out because I kept it as a memento, right? He comes back and he hands me this card. He says, "Call this guy." Now, this is pre-social media, pre-internet, pretty much. This is 93.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
And so he puts out this card, and on the card is Exo Man of War, drawn by Joe Quesada. At that time, he was just another penciler at Valiant Comics, right? And underneath it says,
Fantastic.
It says Kevin Van Hook, editor, on the card. He says, "Call this guy." And I look at his badge. His name is Bill Van Hook. He said he's my brother.
No kidding. Wow.
Right.
Isn't that crazy? You see what I'm saying? And that's actually what made. So I started. I knew nothing about comics. Nothing. I knew nothing about 11x17. Nothing about Bristol board. Right. I went to some print shop, got some really shiny, glossy paper, cut. I went to some guy, said, "I think it's 11x17. Cut it 11x17." I know nothing about size, dimensions, and scalability. And I just started drawing a little story because I love Joe Quesada. It was a ninja, so it was horrible. Long story short, we moved back to Chicago. I come home. We're on welfare now, right? We're on welfare, living in the hood. My wife, we have my son. My wife's pregnant with our daughter. Bleak times. I think I'm stocking shelves at a local grocery store at this point. And so I come home one day, and we have a little 1-bedroom studio apartment. Like my studio now, you can fit 3 of our apartments in it.
Wow.
Right? See, God is good, right?
Right. Yeah.
You can fit 3 of my apartments at that time in it. And I had a little corner in that apartment where my little drafting table was. And I would always come home and look at it. But I would never sit down in it. But the pages were on there. I know the pages were sitting there. They've been sitting there for a year, right? I come back and the pages are gone. And I look at my wife and said, "Babe, where are those pages on my drafting table?" He said, I sent those in. I knew you weren't going to do it. Said, "What? You did what?" And I was livid. You understand what I'm saying? I was livid. Like, how could you? Because I knew they were bad, right? I didn't know what I was doing. 3 weeks later, a letter comes in the mail. I still have a letter in the drawer right behind me. I'd love to show you guys. Letter comes. And it's a letter. Back then, mind you, it's pre-email. There's no email, right? Hand typed by Kevin Van Hook, the editor-in-chief of Valiant Comics. And he broke down every page. Broke down.
Wow.
And I really think you have a lot of potential. Keep at it.
Yeah.
And I highlighted all his critiques. And that's what got my gears going.
That's
so
awesome.
Like little things
That's a
like
cool
that.
story.
When I say it made it a little bit easier to kind of stick to my guns. You know what I'm saying? You have those,
you get clues, right? You get clues from the universe, man. And it's like, when things are smooth, it's like, okay, I'm doing it right. And I used to talk about this too. It's like you run into friction. It's like, well, maybe that's not part of your plan, right? You need to reevaluate, reload, re-engage, and go back on a different course, right?
Well,
So
even like with us though, right? Like Joel and I, we work together at our day jobs. We work with a couple thousand people, and we just happened to sit next to each other. We weren't even in the same job, but we were sitting next to each other in the office. And he was in art. His art was hanging up around the office. I was dabbling in drawing at that point. And, he knew I wanted to write, and that was it. We used to just talk about that stuff, right? And then COVID hit, we got stuck from home, and he reached out to me, saying, "Hey, would you be interested in writing a comic?" And I was like, yeah, I got this story I was trying to do as a novel. This would be cool as a comic, and pitched it to him. And now here we are. Now we have a publishing company. It's like, this is just like, what are the odds with thousands of people working there that the two
I don't
of us
believe in coincidence. I don't believe in it. I've never believed in it. I know I said an hour and a half, but I really don't care. I'm loving this.
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you.
You guys are good. I'm great.
Yeah,
okay.
we'll go as long as
minimum here is 2 hours.
We'll go as long as my battery. It does get a little sketchy, like the headset. I got that new headset, so maybe I'll switch back to that if it gets sketchy about. Okay. Yeah. My battery, and then they kick me off at like 2 hours, and I come back on. It's like my move, but so it's like every show. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but anyway. So, yeah,
I love it.
And just to let you know, too, Solo. My father was a minister too, so I grew up in the church too. So he found God in Korea. Wow. In the war, right? There's no atheists in the foxhole, right? So he would do the sermons on the hood of the Jeep Sunday morning when he was 17. He started doing that and then came back and became. That's actually his medals back here.
I was checking those out. I was checking the
I figured behind you. Yeah. So he was. He became a major in the Salvation Army too when he come back. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. These are the stories that I'm talking about. Like all this is content to me. You understand? But it's funny, like when you how you guys met,
right?
Honor Studios. I tell everyone, Honor Studios is literally a miracle from God. So let's fast forward 2 years from that incident with Eddie Berganza in DC Comics, right? I'm now full blown drawing War in Paradise, working the job, working on the pages. Right? I'm going to make this happen. I volunteer for the Christian table at the next Wizard World Chicago, right? There's a Christian group that I was a part of. And, I'm like, all right, I can get in free if I just volunteer for the table, get into the conference, see my buddies. Now they're in the industry now. They're in the industry now. They're doing their jobs at Marvel and DC, inking and penciling. And so I'm with the Christian table. And here's a little sidebar on the Christian table. This is what they used to always do. They would always put the Christian group right next to the porn star. Literally was a running joke, and we knew it every year. It was hilarious. They put it right next to the big boob Barbie, right? and with all her prints and stuff out there. And so anyway, we're setting up, and here we are with the little Trex Jesus loves you in our now he takes some free candy, all that corny stuff in our crappy Christian books, right? And I'm sure people will make it some feedback, but most Christian books are crappy. You get it from I'm a minister, I can say that. Right, which spurred my desire to create Honor Studios. So anyway, I got my portfolio out and we got everything set up, and I'm with this brother named George Makas. All right, he's a really big heavy set. George just always walked around with a towel because he would just burst out for no reason, right? You know what I mean? It didn't take much for George. And so we get the table all set up, and I'm like, all right, George, we got everything set up. I'll be back in about an hour or so. I'm about to go, check on my guys and let them know I'm here and say, hey, catch up, right? So I leave my portfolio on the table. Everything's all neat. Now, mind you, no one ever comes to the Christian table. We just like to have a presence there, right? It's more vocation than anything else. And what we give away is free, right? And we like to promote the other Christian artists that are, maybe present at the con, right? So we'll carry this up on the table. So I go and I come back. And when I come back, a hurricane looked like it hit the table. I mean, candies everywhere, books missing, the whole 9 yards. And George is literally like drenched. Like, oh my, where were you at? How long? What took you so long? I'm like, what happened, George? And I look and I see my portfolio is moved. And he said, you left your portfolio open. I'm like, what? So what? He said, there was a line here and people just wanted to look at your portfolio. Like, where's the artist? I'm like, whatever. Right. You understand what I'm saying? Like, whatever, George. And so I'm sitting there helping him get he is sweating bullets. He's like drenched. And so he had to go change his shirt. Right. So I'm helping him pick up the sweater. And this lady comes by, this middle-aged, I never forget her, blonde haired, blue-eyed mother. And she had a little 12-year-old Timmy with her. Right. And she said, is this the artist? And George's like, yes, he finally came in. This is the artist, man. This is him. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? She's like, oh, we were looking. And my son opened your portfolio and he liked your work. I'm like, oh, well, thank you, little man. She's like, there's so much garbage here, and, he likes comics, but there's so much stuff I wouldn't let him read here. He's like, but when I found out that George was a Christian story, so it's not quite a Christian story, man, but it's it's inspired by faith content, right? Yeah. I said, but it is safe. I only draw stuff that, I let my kids draw. I'd actually also turned down an opportunity to work for Todd. Bo called me. He wanted me to do some stuff for Spawn. Against my belief system.
Yeah, that's tough.
It was very tough because I needed the money and they paid well.
Yes, exactly.
They paid. I saw what my guy was getting paid. They paid well, and I'm like, I could really use that, but I was conflicted. I was like, we know what Spawn is. I like him as a concept, but it was against my belief system.
Sure.
The subject matter, and so she says, well, my son really likes your stuff. When is your book coming out? And I never said anything about a book coming out because I believe that God knows all his children. We're all wired differently. Like any other father, I got 4 kids. Each kid has a different motivator. You know what I mean? Different buttons to push gets a different kid to act a certain way. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And
I believe we're no different. And so for me, I'm very big on keeping my word. That's a huge thing for me, right? It's very hard to get a yes from me. That's everybody. I tell my students, your no's lend value to your yeses, right? It's easy to say no and change your mind. Good luck saying yes and change your mind. Now you're a jerk,
right?
You know what I'm saying? But I can always say no and change my mind. And now you feel good about that interaction, right? And so this lady says to me, she says, when's your book coming out? And something took over me and it was so impulsive. I said, ma'am, this time next year I'll have my own table. And as soon as I said it, I felt my heart sink. You seriously, because now, mind you, I'm several years into the comics game. I know what it takes. I know, but I'm working at my own pace. And, when you're working a job, you're not really putting like real hard man hours and no one is expecting you anyway. Right. And 2 things that happened. Prior to that, my buddy Warren, who's my partner on the studios, he's a very good writer. He's a very good, he does writing forums. He does commentary for comic sites. You know what I mean? He has writing groups, that he holds in his hometown, right? He's an exceptional writer. Warren had been wooed by other Christian artists. And they said, why are you with Solo? You know he's never going to do anything. And remember we said how people tell you what you can't do?
Right.
Oh, And Warren's like, Solo, I knew when I told you that it was going to light a fire under you. And that really got me going. I'm like, oh, is that what they said? Okay.
Yeah, watch this. You know, you're like,
like we say in the hood, bet. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I said, ma'am, this time next year, we'll have a table. And I felt my heart sink. Like, why'd you say that? You don't have anything. You don't have any money to pay anybody. It's just you writing and drawing, right? As soon as I said it, 5 minutes later, this little short dude comes by. About 5'7", balding, middle-aged white guy. He says, "Are you the artist?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the artist." You know, "Yeah, man, I was by here, man." He says, "You have a nice little crowd over here. I'm an artist too. I want to work with you." So I'm a little full of myself because apparently some people have liked my stuff, right? And so I'm a little full of myself. I'm like, "Well, show me what you got." Right? He hands me his portfolio. I open it up, and it's some of the most beautiful acrylic paint work, illustrative work I've ever seen in my life. And I recognize some of it from covers of books.
Wow.
I'm like, "What is your name?" He's like, "Doug Klauba." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." This guy studied under Drew Struzan.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
He
Yeah.
studied. He
I'm a big Drew Struzan fan, so that's my guy. Right?
He literally moved to California and lived with Drew Struzan for several months.
Wow.
And studied under Drew. He graduated at the American Academy of Art with Alex Ross. They were classmates.
Damn. Yeah,
Alex
that's great.
I call him while I'm there sometimes because I'm actually, if you look up Doug Klauba, if you look at his Phantom and his Batman, that's me. I'm the model for those. Right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, but I'm looking at his stuff. I'm like, "I can't afford you, man." I said, "I appreciate it, but I can't afford you." He said, "No, you don't understand." He said, "I saw your stuff." He said, "I'm a Christian too." He said, "And the Lord told me to work with you. Whatever you need, I got you."
Wow.
He was the first member. Like,
Wow.
wow. Wasn't done yet. 15 minutes later, a black guy comes by. Looks like a comic book geek, So I took him as such, right? He's like, "Hey, man, I hear that you're a Christian. You tried to do your own comic book." He's like, "Yeah, man, I saw your stuff. It was really good. I want to work with you." I'm like, "All right, well, what do you do?" I knew nothing about coloring. I didn't know anything about Photoshop. I leveled up, obviously, but I knew nothing about coloring at the time. I just knew how to draw and write. I opened up his portfolio. I see Image. I see DC. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Right? He's like, "Yeah, man." I said, "Well, dude, I ain't got no money, man." I was always straight up like, "I don't have any money. I appreciate the offer. I don't have." He said, "No, man, you don't understand." He said, "I'm a Christian." He says, "We need stuff like that in the marketplace." He says, "Whatever you need, I got you." A year later, Honor Studios had a table at the next con and we sold out.
Wow.
That's
See
awesome.
what I'm
awesome.
saying? It was like, so when stuff like that happens, as much as it stings, the adherence to what you know to be true becomes a little bit easier. You understand? Because I know it's going to come back around some way, somehow, better than what I expected.
Yeah,
If I just don't compromise and stay the course.
that's it.
You know.
You got to listen to those, and you got to acknowledge them like you're doing. They'll happen more often. So I know one thing, it's happened to every single human out there. And as I've gotten older, this is something I've learned is like, at night, some things, thoughts and demons will crawl into your mind and wake you up, make you worry about stuff, right? And as I've gotten older, I just go, yeah, it's in God's hands.
Yep.
Right? There's things I can't control. I will never be able. So what am I going to do at 2:42 a.m. in the morning to fix this? Nothing. Right. Nothing I can do. It's in God's hands. And that's such a relief. I go back to sleep. Right. Yeah. And just having that concept and that mentality as, I'm 42, going to be 43 this year. When I was a young guy, I was like trying to fix all that stuff. It's like, you can't. It's just God's control. Go. Right. And then you acknowledge, like you said, to your point, you acknowledge God's good graces. Say God's good. I was able to get a beautiful property here in New Hampshire, last year, and we went through a lot of trials and tribulations to get there. But if I hadn't gone through that, this wouldn't have happened, right? And I always say the strongest foundations are built upon the stones of adversity.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, there's never anybody that has it easy from the jump, right? It's always, hey man, I lived in my car for 3 years, or it's never anybody says I'm going to go make a book, a music, anything, and hits it right off the jump. Never ever. It's always a struggle, and those are the greatest artists, the greatest musicians, authors. They go through that because I think it makes you stronger, and you have to go through that for sure.
And it's a muscle it's a muscle that is necessary to do anything that's worth doing.
Yeah.
Right. You understand that faith muscle that that death grip on what you know to be true. You know what I mean? And doesn't mean that you're resistant to other information, right? But I'm talking about the core, the essential stuff. You understand that you know that
definitely.
if I move off of this, there's probably no coming back from it. You understand? And so it's been my lifeline. You know, even after we started Honor Studios, another incident I remember. I mean, I got him, dude. Another incident. All right, so now Honor Studios is rolling. We're actually going to work on a real book, right? The con we did great. I did a little rinky-dink sketchbook. We sold out, right? And so now we're going to the full-blown book. And I went out to Rhode Island to my buddy who's working at Hasbro, and it's, hey, Will.
Hey, Will. Will's having a rough week. We're friends with Will outside. He's actually working with Rios on a book, Heel Turn. Rios did the work on artwork on that. So
cool.
Will's having a rough week. So I think he's finding our talk here good. And that's exactly why we enjoy doing this show, man. We go all kinds of different angles, right? It could be about books or, you know, because it's all about being humans, right? And how we deal with everything. And it's very awesome how we all have a lot of things in common, right? There's, like you mentioned earlier in the show, Solo, there's more things that bring us together than pull us apart, right?
Yeah.
That's ultimately all. Yeah.
Also, Perry, when you mention faith, that can mean loads of things. You know, depends on your culture, your religious background, so many things. And you know, like I'm an advocate for the words of Jesus. You know, some of them have been, you know, twisted around, but like when he says that when you really ask, the doors are about to be open. I don't have the right words, but I do believe that there is something really wonderful on those words. Like, you have to ask. You have to get into your inner self and ask from the bottom of your heart and say, ask. Like, you're in a fucking bad situation now. Like, you're uninspired. Like, there's so many people now that they have been hit by COVID situation, and there's so many people like putting an end to their lives. Like, I'm not joking. This is this fucking horrible situation. And like, when you mention having faith, that means that you, as a human being, you have that into you. It's a program, because Jesus said, you are a God. And he said that like a couple of times in the Bible. And, you know, I don't want to be committed to any of the Old Testament thing, you know, because I think that's something else. But I stick to the words of Jesus, and those words, they do make sense. And when we are in the art world, artists are not the most pragmatic people. Like, we work from heart. Like, I don't really make good decisions when it comes to money and things like that. But once you have decided to follow your inner voice, like, there's no way you're gonna be mistaken, you know. No. And when you say that you trust your faith, that means a lot. There's another plane here. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Incoming. Get down.
That means a lot, because you work with things that touches people, you know, like you entertain, like you make people feel emotions, and this is all we are here about, you know. And like every time someone like you comes out and just speak from the heart, you know, that means a lot. You know, like even if that touches just one person somewhere on the planet, it would be like worth it. You know, so I thank you very much for that.
Man, that blesses me, brother. Thank you so much. And your words are very true. I want to expound on something that you said, and excuse me if I get on a soapbox, but what you said was very true. You know, and it's three parts what Jesus told us to do. He said, ask, and it shall be given. The second is seek, which is based in vision. Seek, and you shall find. What do you have to see it. And then the last one is your action. Knock. You have to do something physical. Knock, and the door will be open. Right. And so I'm like, when you live, that's a formula for getting everything that God has in store for you. Right. First, you ask. You make it known what you want. Right. And then where's your vision going to take you? Because when you seek is not looking, it's active. Like if you lose your car, if you lose your keys, if you lose your wallet, you didn't just say, look, I can't find it. No, you're tossing stuff. That's a seek, right?
My kids will do that when I tell them to go, pick up the
exactly.
clothes.
You pick up the couch and everything else. Throwing your back out, right?
If there's a bag of chocolate chips, man, they're on it. They're going to find that. So.
Right. And to me, that's a formula for as it pertains to faith, for success in faith. And so even to go onto that, I remember shortly after I got my team together, right, and we're going to do the Honor Studios thing. We were in a much smaller house in the city. I'm on the police department. And, my wife is a powerful, spiritual woman of God, and God talks to her all the time. Me, I think sometimes I'm a redheaded stepchild, because when he talks to me, he's like one or two words. Go, stop. Right? She has all these flowery conversations. I get one word. You're like a dog. Sit, heel. Right.
She just takes them all. She takes your half too. Right. That's what it is. Right. So
anyway, I remember, and once again, these are things that kind of fuel you going forward. I remember we're in this house, and I just recently come back from Rhode Island. Once again, pre-internet, pre-YouTube. And I'm like, I got to learn Photoshop. Now, I'm talking about the first version of Photoshop. So my buddy's working at Hasbro. I go out to his house, and he lets me stay there for a week, and he teaches me Photoshop. Right, because he's got a Mac, he's got the first Power PC. I don't know if you remember the big one, the big old tower.
Oh yeah,
right? Power PC.
I have that
one. The old one, the big white one, right?
Yeah.
And so I was up to every night up to 3:00 in the morning learning lasso tool, learning grid. I'm just trying to get all I can. I ain't got no computer back at home. Okay, so I don't know what I'm learning this for, but I just know I needed to learn it. And so I get back home, and a few months later, I walk down to the basement, and I hear two words: make room. So I look at the corner, and I just start moving things, right? I start moving things. So my wife comes home from work. She says, what are you doing? I said, I think God wants me to make room for my new computer. She's like, now mind you, I've done all the research. The Mac plus all the programs, we're talking $5,000 at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Was not happening, was nowhere in the foreseeable future, right? I said, babe, all I know is what I heard. He don't talk to me too much, so something must be going on with this, right? About 3 weeks later, we get water damage in our house, right? And the guy comes out and he says, all right, I'm going to give you guys the insurance hookup. I'm going to make this damage, he says, but I'm going to write it to your insurance company and we're going to get your whole house done.
Wow.
So my wife's getting basically a new house. I mean, broke down everything, right, for some damage. And I'm like, look, we don't want to do anything illegal. He says, no, it's legal. He's like, you're qualified for this much based on this damage, even though this damage isn't this much. He says, I don't know how far it can go, so I'd rather have more money than not enough, right?
Sure.
And so he gets it, and she gets the whole house done. So I'm not even thinking about the computer, right? After the house is done, she sits in the bed. She says, babe, how much was that computer and stuff? She said, I said it was about $5,000. Mine, I still got that empty space down in my basement. She's like, go pick out your computer tomorrow. I was like, what are you talking about? She says, there was $5,000 left over in the budget.
Wow. Yeah.
The next 3 days later, I had the Mac, I had the Retina display, I had the style, I had everything.
Yeah,
right?
That's amazing.
And literally, it was like to the dollar, right? And so it was this kind of stuff. And even like the thing that kind of launched us, like the Chicago Sun-Times article, this was really funny. We were going on a cruise. My wife and we were going on a cruise. Now, mind you, I'm working 6 nights a week in Chicago, and it's summer, so it's hell every night,
right?
Literally, I'm exhausted. I'm vacillating. I'm oozing for this cruise, right? So there's this little rinky-dink Christian comic book convention at a college nearby, right? The Christian group I'm in, they sent out the invitation, and it's the first ever of these. And I knew, because these things are always bad. They're always horrible, right? And it was the first one, and she's like, oh, I was like, are you going? This is the night before. I'm like, no, I'm not going. It's my first night off. We got the cruise the day after tomorrow. I'm like, nope, I'm chilling. And it's 2 hours away. I'm not driving that on my first day off. Like, skip that. So the day of it comes, it's a Saturday. And I wake up, walk to the bathroom, and I'm in full stream. Right? I'm in full stream. And all I hear is go. And I literally say, oh man. I'm watching the bedroom. And she's like, what? I think God wants me to go to this convention. She's like, what are you gonna do? I said, what do you mean? I think I'm gonna go. I gotta go. Right. And so I grabbed my stuff, and I didn't even grab all my stuff because I really went half-heartedly. So I grabbed my stuff, and I'm literally, traffic is bad. I'm just like irritated, right? And I get there, and it's exactly what I thought it was, right? It's exactly what I thought it was. It was maybe like 6 people there, you know what I mean? And they're sitting there talking. I tell people I perpetrate a geek.
Did you hear that?
I'm a real geek. You know what I mean? I think I kind of perpetrate it, you know, because I don't have a high threshold for a lot of the conversation. You know, if it's, you know what I mean? After a while, it's like you're talking in circles. You know what I mean?
My brother's like that. He's geek like 10. I'm like 7.
I'm
right?
geek adjacent.
Yeah. Geek proxy.
I'm geek adjacent.
You know, Perry, when you say that you hear go, like, did you hear that acoustically from the outside
sounded audible.
source?
It sounded, each time it was an audible voice.
Inside your head?
It was like audible inside my, and I literally said, my wife, if she would come down, she heard me because she was in the bedroom. She thought something was wrong. I said, oh man. She's like, what? That was literally my response, you know?
Yeah.
I said, God just told me to go to that thing. Well, what are you gonna do? What do you mean I'm going? Right? You know?
Yeah.
Because I don't hear from him. I don't hear from God like that. Like, I know people, you know, in our faith that, you know, they have these really elaborate, in-depth conversations. It's not me. That's never been my experience, right? And so I go, but here's what I can say. Unlike many of those people that claim to, and I never see the results from it, every time I've heard his voice, something happened that I could attest to it. So I get to this thing. It's called a convention, right? It's not really a convention. There's only like 6 people there, right? It's at this little, on this floor in this room at this junior college, right? And I'm like, I'm about to leave. Literally, I was about to go. I was there maybe an hour, right? I'm about to go. And just when I'm really at my wit's end, these 3 people come in. One's got a camera, one's a woman, and the other dude has got carrying a bag. And I'm just sitting there, right? I'm like, who are these people? And they just start talking to people, you know, the other guys. I'm just sitting there, and finally they get to me. They talk to me last, right? And they take my photo. I didn't think anything of it. I thought nothing of it. I thought it was maybe like the college newspaper, something like that.
Sure.
I go on the cruise. Now, mind you, this is back when you had the Razor flip phones, right? So it wasn't like the nice, pretty screens we had. It's a Razor flip phone. And, you know, you weren't getting reception if you leave your city. You can just pretty much hang it up, right? Wasn't a whole lot of towers back then. So we go on the cruise. We come back. As soon as we make landfall, all the messages start coming in, the voicemails. And I'm looking like, what is this? And, you know, my aunt's like, Dwayne, call me immediately. I'm like, what? And so I call her, and she's like, you were featured in the Chicago Sun-Times. I said, what? I said, what? And she bought a stack of them. My aunt,
Yeah,
you know, she bought a stack of them. And I have it in my scrapbook. There it was, me holding my characters up, you know, Christian comics, meet the new face of Christian comics, Dr. Solo Perry, War in Paradise, Christian version of Marvel. And then I started doing television interviews, the whole 9 yards, from just because I went.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was gone for a week. So
Yeah.
I was gone for a week. I had no clue, right? Came back, I did a couple of television interviews, and that's what launched Honor Studios. So it's like when that kind of stuff happens, it's kind of like, the no's still. I'm quicker to say no than say yes if it doesn't feel right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that's it. Well, hopefully something cool comes from this, right? So hopefully,
and if not, this is just I like connecting with people.
Yeah, us too.
That's my thing. It's like it's not your net worth; it's your network.
Yeah,
really. I mean, like I take such pleasure in being able to, like in my class, where I can call my guy, and he's working on 5 books at any given time for Marvel and DC, right? I'm like, yo, man, literally, I call him that day. Can you give me like a half an hour with my students? Solo, no problem for you. Just what he's doing, Zoom, right? My students, and they're talking to a Marvel DC artist. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and he's got deadlines. But when you foster those kind of relationships, that's invaluable.
Right?
You understand what I'm saying? You know, I never forget what Bo Smith told me, and I think it kind of really helped shape how I try to navigate the business space. And then my business mentor Gerald Broussard kind of echoed that. He was the first one to introduce me to the concept that business is not about business, it's about people and relationships.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
But Bo Smith later on that night, after I got the card from Eddie Berganza, he just happens to walk into the pizza joint we're sitting in, right? So we're at the same pizza. He walks in, I get up, you know. He's like, how'd it go about that? He says, yeah. He said, yeah, I talked to Eddie. He said he really liked your stuff. He said, you're a really good storyteller. I'm like, thank you so much for that opportunity. You know, he said, listen, man. He said, you know, not saying that you don't have work to do. I'm like, yeah, I know I have work to do. You know, I said, I just really appreciate, you know, you making the effort to send me over there. You know, I said, you didn't know that he'd like my stuff. You know, he says, no, he says, but here's the thing, Sol. He says, one of the main reasons I sent you over there, he says, because he said, you'll do well in this industry for no other reason than you're a nice guy. He said, talent's a dime a dozen. Because there's a lot of talented pricks out there. He says, but I know editors, they'll work with someone less talented that they like. You know, and I'm like, he said, stay likable. He said, and it'll open doors for you. I'm like, you know, man, I appreciate that. You know, and so it's about people. It's not about your skill. I tell my students all the time, it's not about your skill. That might open the door for you. You know what I mean? But I don't know of any editor or any business person that wants to be in the room with someone they don't like or be on the phone with someone they don't like. You have to be extremely rarely gifted for them to tolerate you if they don't like you.
Yeah, well, you see that in sports, right? The guy has a great clubhouse presence, right? He's like not the best player in the world, but he brings the team together in the clubhouse, right? That's an important thing. So
it's huge.
Yeah,
huge.
All those championship teams have that one guy, that main character that pulls everybody together. Yeah,
that new guy.
Yeah.
People buy personalities. People buy characters. Like we are all the time wearing different types of masks,
right?
But they want to buy a nice mask, not a bad one, not a kind of, you know, a scumbag mask. And actually, like the reason why we're doing comics is because we can choose people to partner with.
Yes.
You know, because there's no reason to be here in the industry if you don't work with the nice guys and you make your time just go a lot smoother by doing that. Differently to go into a day job. You're there just to, you know, make your money, come back home. It's a totally different type of environment. So, like, staying likable is, I think, one of the first requirements to be in the industry.
Well, think about our situation too, right, Rogerio? It's like, so we put out, like, on these Facebook groups, like, hey, we're looking for artists, right? And we had like 70 responses. We didn't expect that. We're like, I'm sitting there trying to respond to everybody. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed right now. And like the whole time, like Joel was like, you know, I think we should take a look at Rogerio. Like, he's followed us quite a bit from the beginning. Like, you know, we should talk to him. And we liked his work on Heel Turn, the other comic he did. Mm-hmm. And we had him on as the first guest of our show to promote the other comic. And here he is as a co-host. It's like, obviously we're not making money off this, but it's just like, it's all connected, you know? So
I love it.
Yeah.
It's about making connections, man. And maintaining your network. Seriously, it's, I'm very big on just staying connected to those who matter. And mind you, catch the subtext. Those who matter. Everybody doesn't matter.
Right.
A lot of times we pursue people that really don't have your best interest at heart, or are not willing to give. We have takers and we have givers, right? I just had a conversation with one, and it was a real. I'm a real dude. I have another platform. My wife and I have a marriage coaching platform that's very popular on Facebook.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so we're actually rebranding it right now. But I do a lot of mentor, a lot of coaching, and I had to tell this one brother. I said, "Listen, man," I said, not that I'm not able to do for you, but I won't. He was like, "Why?" I said, "Because you always come with an ask. This is never a give. You know what I mean? It's always an ask." I said, and that's a problem, right? You should start every conversation is, what do you need from me? What can I do to help you with your thing? There's a great book by Gary Vaynerchuk, Jab, 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 Right Hook, right? And it's a metaphor for the 3 jabs represent 3 gives. And it's just basic, growing your social media audience or selling your product. Give, give, give. And by the 3rd give, your audience is more likely to reciprocate when you ask, because you've shown your hand. You dig what I'm saying? Give value, give value, give value. Buy this $5 book from me. Right? But once you've given value, that's a very easy ask. you understand?
Yeah, because we need to reciprocate.
You feel obligated to.
Yeah,
right?
That's natural.
Yeah, it's natural. It's human behavior. So I'm very leery of people that are always leading with help me, help me, help me. Especially when they have something of value, right, that they're not putting on the table. One guy came to me. He wanted to actually apprentice under me last year, and I was going to take him on for no other reason. He came with a give. He's like, "Yo, dude, let me know what you need from me. I just want to learn from you." I said, "Okay." I said, "Cool." He's like, "Dude,
Right.
stop by and I'll sweep your studio. I don't care what it is." And he's a 30-something-year-old man with kids, but the humility, so I just want to learn from you. I want to learn what you, because I spoke at a thing, this conclave of artists, and they were all stuck, didn't know how to do social media. And I just made a statement that turned into a masterclass. And he came, he's like, "Dude, just tell me what you want. What do you want? What do you want from me? I'll do it. I just want to learn from you." I'm like, "Dude, you're going to be okay." I said, "Really, there's not much." And now he's killing it. And I've done almost nothing for him. I just that mentality. I said, "Dude, trust me. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're going to be okay." He's like, "I said, because you have the mindset for it. You're already halfway there. It's about giving value to your audience." I said, "Just what you did to me, do it with your audience and watch what happens."
Yeah, that's great advice.
Those words that they mean a lot to many young artists, because sometimes you are really good, but you get opinions from your friends and not from professionals. Right. Like when I post an illustration, like all my friends, they go, "Oh, yeah, that's wonderful, beautiful," etc. But when I get an impression from someone that is not friends with me and are from the industry and somebody that I respect, fuck, this is like a zillion times better, right. Because you take into consideration the background, and your friends, they're gonna like it, whatever you do. It's not really valuable opinion when it comes to friends.
That's true. That's easy. That's the low hanging fruit, right? That's the expectation. You know what I mean? But you're absolutely right. It's all about reach. You know what I'm saying? It really is about reach. And when you have, I tell people, when you have a good touch, expand your reach. It's like you have a good touch by how those closest to you are responding. You know what I mean? That's a good indicator of how good your touch is. Right now, expand that circle out a little bit and try to reach some people, right? And watch doors open. You know, one of the things that really blesses me as a father is watching my kids implementing a lot of things that my wife and I have tried to put into them. And now, you know, they're entrepreneurs, very successful. One's going to law school.
Oh, nice.
You know what I mean? And it really was about leading with people.
Right.
Lead with people, right? Let people know that you are willing to give and watch what happens. You know, watch the reciprocation, you know, and all you have to do is give what you can afford. No one's asking you to die on your sword. No one's asking you to martyr yourself, you know, but most people just don't want to give what they can even afford. I'm like, dude, well, you got something to value. Show up, man. Put up.
Right.
You know?
Great. Yeah. Speaking of that, like, can you tell us something about your grandson? Because you're very happy, very excited when you talk about him. Like, I want you to record it because it's going to be on YouTube forever, and maybe in the future he can come back and you know, like,
love it.
Listen to your words. Like,
I love it.
What kind of words would you leave to your future grandson when he's accomplished? Like,
do right by people. Do right by people. Keep your word. Stand by your values. And always seek to do service. My whole life has been service, and not even intentionally. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, I picked that up.
I don't want to make it seem like it's something that was very altruistic and deep, you know, but when I reflect, like, man, almost my entire life has been service, from the military to police work to ministry. Now
teaching.
You know what I mean?
Right.
What's his name?
Michael. He's actually named after the angel in this book. My eldest son named after my character, Michael, nice. Or Michael.
Okay, Michael, listen to your old man, all right, and do as he says.
I love it. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic.
Thank you so much. He's a super geek. He didn't get that from me. When I tell you he's a super geek, this kid is his knowledge is ridiculous.
You know, like, really we all here have kids, and we want to have a kind of copy of ourselves sometimes, because like, we want to make them do better. Yeah. Like, sure. I have a 6-year-old.
Oh wow.
And he's all the time asking things and doing his drawings. And like, he knows I do this kind of stuff here, and he's very excited. He asks me about it, and like, this is something that I always wanted. You know, like, I have a 22-year-old, which is a woman now, and I have this. Yeah, he's a 6-year-old, and it's like, oh, that's my chance. That's my chance.
That's your opportunity.
Yeah. And maybe you didn't have that chance with your 4 kids, and now you have it. You know, that's
actually my youngest son is a geek, but he never got the drawing bug. His is all action figures and figurines. He's got a huge collection of action figures, and his knowledge of the mythos is incredible. He's actually a very successful gym owner, right? He's about to be 27 this weekend.
Do you think that being so good at your craft might have been discouraging to him?
I don't actually. I don't. He's actually been always very proud of my work. He's always been like one of my big. He actually, you'll probably see this because I'm not saying this because I'm on this show. It's actually a plan that's in work, because I'm actually I've got a bunch of content I'm about to start releasing on my YouTube channel, right? Because I record everything that I do, every drawing, everything. So I have like a 12 terabyte hard drive with nothing but videos, right? But it was funny when he was about 6. We were at a con, and the moniker that I call myself on some of my videos, he gave it to me at 6. And we were walking around this con, right? It was Wizard World Chicago, and I'm introducing him to all my buddies in the industry, you know, and we're walking down the aisles, and artists everybody's like, "Hey, Solo, what's up, Solo? That's Solo." Hey, you know, and you know, he looks at me and he says, "Daddy." I said, "What, Jordan?" He says, it's like you're famous, but nobody knows who you are. And so and what he meant was, and so a lot of times I'll introduce myself. I say, hey, I'm Solo. I'm the most famous artist you've never heard of. And so, and it's becoming like this running joke. And even now, my wife's like, you don't remember saying this? She said he doesn't even remember saying it, but I remember it cracked me up. And I think my buddy was with me, hear him say this. It's like you're famous, but nobody knows who you are. In other words, why do all these artists know you, but you're not working for the big company? That's what he meant.
Yeah.
And so out of the mouths of the babes, right? But now he's 7'6'5".
I know where we're coming from. Like last Wednesday, we were interviewing some guy who's very famous for writing books, on horror and things. And I was surprised to realize that my daughter, she's a fan of his.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then she came to me and said, you guys on Livid must be, like hitting big time, because he's an accomplished man. How can he be on your show talking to you?
To you, I know who you are.
Yeah, I know who you are. Like you are my dad, and
that's all you are. That's all you will ever be.
And then she asked me, "Are you willing to become famous?" And I said, "No, I want to be successful, because there's a difference between being famous and being successful. Being successful is being happy with what you do. Being famous is like being a celebrity, which I'm not really interested in.
Me either.
Yeah.
So I say it all the time. I'm very comfortable. Like I told my buddy Warren, I said, I'd be very comfortable, say Honor Studios becomes what I envision it to be. I'd be very comfortable if I didn't have to draw again. You know what I mean? If I'm just orchestrating behind the scenes, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with making stars and putting people in the spotlight. I'm okay with that. I've never needed it. You know what I'm saying? And those lights get hot after a while. I've seen it. Like one of my buddies, he's extremely famous in the industry. He's worked for every major publisher. He was a lead artist at Blizzard and at Riot. He was one of the guys that was in that crew with me that day at the con, that fateful day. And we actually talked about a couple of months ago. He called me and he was like, Solo, he says, I've had, because we were just talking, I'm very real. I said, dude, I said, I can't lie, man. I said, I part of me's envious. I'm happy, but I'm a little envious of yours. You know what I mean? And
that's great.
He says, but look at you, man. He said, you have a whole family. He said, I don't have that. He said, you got grandkids. Like, I don't have that. He's like, and all those characters I drew, he says, I don't own any of them. And it really set me back. He's like, you own everything you're doing. He says, you're working on pitches, bro. He says, I'm just going from book to book. And this is a real we talked for about an hour, and it just really, like, the grass is always greener. You dig what I'm saying? And neither one of us is going to win that argument. We're going to be quite, but I hear you. But I would like to have been on the cover of, whatever Imagine Effects magazine like you have. I would have liked that. You know what I'm saying? The volumes that you keep releasing. I just bought your art of book. So it's going to be that forever a cyclical argument, but it really comes down. I told my wife, it comes down to being content. You know what I'm saying? I'm content at this stage. If I never, like, if I work for one of the, here's the good thing. It's never too late, right? Like, I'm looking at my stuff now. A buddy of mine, I just did my first con in 20 years. Sitting behind a table. I did my first con in 20 years since we released War in Paradise. And I was a nervous wreck, right? And it's a small con in my wife's hometown in Kentucky, right? And my guy, the one who's helped me develop the pitch decks, he's the one who's actually selling properties, IPs. I said, yo, dude, I said, I'm a little bit anxious if I'm being honest. And he said something very poignant to me that just totally, you can't tell I'm a real transparent guy. You know, I'm definitely an alpha male, but I have my circle that I know I can just really just be very honest with. You know, I don't mind being vulnerable to them because I can trust them with it, right? And he said, Solo, he said, what are you nervous about? I said, dude, it's been 20 years. He said, where were you at 20 years ago? And I looked at the book and I hate it because that's where I was 20 years ago. And I'm so much better now, right? And he said, Solo, this is the best version of you that's ever done this. And that totally flipped my perspective. He says, the version of you right now is the best version of you to have ever done this. And I went and I killed that con, man. I destroyed that con. According to my son, he's like, Dad, you were selling like crazy. And I wasn't even there to sell. I was there to promote. you know what I mean? Selling was just a byproduct, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's really about, you know, being content. And I'm like, whatever it is for me is for me, right? I'm not going to covet what's for somebody else, right? The decisions I made, I can live with those. I can die with those, right? I can sit back and I can say, I went with my gut. I went with what felt right. And I have no regrets. I have no regrets, you know? And even now at, you know, almost 50 years old, I'm getting more offers than I got when I was in my 20s.
So you're 40, you're 49.
I'm 49.
You have a 9-year-old grandson. Wow.
Yeah, I have a 30-year-old son, 31-year-old son.
You know, honestly, I was hoping that I would get someone older than me tonight. But no, not really.
We're close enough for you.
Yeah, I'm about to be 51 next week. So,
man, you make it look good, man. You make it look good, brother.
Thank you.
You don't tell it. We won't know it.
I was thinking that you were a kind of extraterrestrial because you look like 40 and you have a 9-year-old. That was about to be my next question, but you answered that already.
Well, when we were talking offline, I said you had a 9-year-old grandkid because I was watching the video of it was like you guys were comparing your Batman drawings or something like that, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And he's like, he has a 9-year-old grandkid. Like, how old is he? Like, he saw your picture. He's like, he can't be that old.
Yeah, man.
My brother had a kid at 18 like that too.
I got 4 grandkids and 1 on the way.
My mom was 18 when she had me. I'm a twin, so how do you think? She probably was like, "Oh boy."
Yeah, man, that's transformative, man. But once you have those kids, it's funny the decisions that you make for them. You know what I'm saying? You know, hey James.
Hey James.
Hey.
I wanted to say something like when you were like, you know, you said something like in the way that Joel and I have always talked since we started this whole thing was, I mean, sure, the money would be amazing, right? If our comic ever got turned into a show, awesome, right? Mm-hmm. But the fact that we can say we did it, like we're doing it our way, and I'm holding a comic that I wrote in my hand, you know, huge. It's like, yeah, like, and people are buying it from us. Like it's just, if that was where it ended, I'd be like, talk to my son, like the kids in the books named after my son, Will. And, he asked me the other day, he's like, is Will going to be the most famous name in the world? And I'm like, well, I didn't tell him it's already pretty famous, but I was like,
yes,
maybe,
it is.
Buddy.
It's because of the book.
Yeah. And he's like, are we rich? He goes, are we rich now? I'm like, it's not about that.
It's not about that.
No. Yeah.
It's about accomplishing something, right?
Right.
You know, I sometimes I'm very cautious of not polishing trophies from the past. Right. For me, it's always about what's next. But the trophies of the past do have a purpose. They're meant to collect dust. Right. They're meant to collect dust, but stay in view. You understand? To remind you of what you're capable of. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not going to sit there and nurse it. But every once in a while, I'll look over in the shelf. I'm like, you know, I did that. I can do this. You know what I mean? And so I remember talking to my wife once, and it was actually in the midst of an argument. And, you know, she's very fiery. She's very fiery and very vocal, especially to me. And she was actually challenging because she felt that I was kind of dragging my feet on launching the school, right? And I'm very much, probably to a fault, I'm very meticulous, right? I like to give, like even with Honor Studios, when people saw us when we released, people were asking for internships. And I'm like, it's 4 dads in my basement. Intern where, right? I like to look bigger than what I am. I have a peacock syndrome. Just because I'm small doesn't mean I have to look small. You know. And so it's peacock syndrome. Let's just flare it up. Let's make it look really, really, really big. But people have responded to that. And so I told her, I said, you know, in my process while I'm being all meticulous and whatnot, she was like, just freaking do something. I said, do something. And it turned I got quiet. I'm like, all right, maybe I need to remind you of what I've done to date. You know, and when I started reciting the things, she got quiet. Because a lot of times you can be so close to a person, you don't know how to gauge the metric. And I said, I've done some things. You understand? I'm out in the world. I have that book, that's legacy. Whether it becomes a multi-million-dollar seller or not, that's going to be passed down. Look what your granddad did. Look what your great-granddad did. Look what your great-great-granddad did. You know what I mean? And it may not happen now, but it may happen 30 years from now when said kid is now an executive at some entertainment holographic entity. He says, you know what? My granddad wrote something back in the day. Let's see what we can do with it. This is how these things happen, you know? And so I'm very keen on making sure that those that accomplish anything know how to appreciate just the power of having something done. That's powerful.
Yeah.
There are so many people that just won't finish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even if you just finished the one, you finished it. Now, what a lot of people don't know that I'm always very hesitant to say, that we released War in Paradise #0. There's actually 3 more books that are written, drawn, and completed that have never seen print. And we're actually going to compile them in our Kickstarter, right? They've never seen the light of day. They are sitting in my portfolio.
I was going to ask you how you were going to get those out.
17 years old that have never seen print, because we've actually reinvented the story. In 17 years, it's evolved. Now we have a game. The game is getting rave reviews from the testers, right? And so a board game that my partner developed. You know, I wrote the story, reinvented the comic to correspond with the game, because I never cared how it came out. To me, it's a concept. It's not a medium, if that makes sense, right? When I wrote it, it was meant for animation. It became a comic book. I don't care. Let's make it a freaking game. Who cares, right? It's about the story. How you want to experience the story is irrelevant to me. You know, you understand what I'm saying? But the story sticks, right? And so, you know, even in that, it's just like, just finish. I tell people, just finish. At least you can say you did it.
Right.
Whatever came from it, you did it. My app does not have thousands of downloads, but it's got 5 stars from people I don't know. I did it.
There you go. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I did it. Okay. What's next? You see what I'm saying? And there's a comfort there. I tell people, no, you don't have to polish that trophy, but it's okay to look at it as it collects dust and like, yep, I did it. Now what's next?
Yep. I think one thing I would say to that is like the joke that Joel and I had was when we were doing Yule was we're going to have boxes of this sit in our basement for the next 20 years that will be given out for Christmas gifts, you know, hundreds of comics. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I can hold it up and say I did this. Like, it's hanging on my wall behind the banner that I take down. And like, that'll never leave the wall, you know? So
Bro, I got 1,500 books over there of War in Paradise from 2004.
there you go. Hopefully my wall gets that fill someday.
They're going to be part of the Kickstarter. I'm like, oh, this. They were selling at the con. I wasn't even promoting it. I just had it on the table. And people were like, oh, what is this? I'm like, yeah, what is it? Cover price, whatever it says. I forgot what it said, $350. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, just do it. And whatever it is, it's got legs. If it had legs, then it has legs now. You understand what I'm saying? You know, even like with us revisiting and redoing the story, it's just a natural evolution of the creative process. You dig what I'm saying? Yeah. As you learn more, as you refine your craft, right? As you become more versed in your storytelling ability and your artistic ability, you know, what worked in 2004 may not carry over in 2021. You understand? And so I'm very big on just being pliable You know what I mean? I've never been rigid with it. You know,
I got a question related to that. Like I see in your works that you do the whole thing. Like you do the pencils, you do the final, the inking and the colors, like that. And you have some Photoshop works in there, which is amazing. Like, how do you perfect your craft as like new mediums are coming? Like there's so many new ways of presenting your art. Like, are you still sticking to the pencil and paper, or you're just looking for new types of ways of software expression into what you do? Like, how do you keep sharp?
I keep sharp
and precise.
It's funny that you say that. A while ago, right before I retired from law enforcement, I was at a really bad place creatively, because I always admired the artists that you could look at their work and you knew who it was without seeing the signature. Oh my God, that's Pepe Larraz. Oh my gosh, that's Carlos Pacheco. Well, that's Barry Windsor Smith. That's John Byrne. When I looked at my stuff, it was all different styles. I'm an artist without a style. And that came from my formative years in animation, having to be on model. You gotta remember, when I really learned how to draw, it was all about being on model, right? And so whatever that design style was, that character design, I had to be on that model, right? And so I found myself just being able to draw whatever style. You want animated style, cool. You want realism, I got it. You want iconic comic arc, I got it. You want elevated animation, I got it, right? However that looked. Now that I'm able to do this full time, I've been free, because even like when I was doing Honor Studios and all the whatever freelance work, I did storyboards for small films and stuff. I did stuff for a very popular video game. I storyboarded the ending sequence, but I was still a cop full time. You see what I'm saying? This was like part-time stuff, right? And so now that I'm retired, I told my class, I said, I feel like a born again artist. Now all I want to do is explore. You understand? You know, like the pencil and paper, I got that. That's not going anywhere. Like if you were to ask me to pull out something, if you ask me what I would prefer, it's always going to be traditional, because that's just like the pinnacle of confidence. Because once it's down, it's down. There's no Command Z. There's no undo. Right. You understand? There's no erasure tool. Right? There's no making a layer disappear. All the layers, they're there. Yeah. Whatever it is, it's there, right? And so I like traditional is always going to be my core. So what I do in my routine, believe it or not, my daily routine is like I have these projects I have to do, and I get this from my students all the time. Digital strength is its convenience and ease of communication, right? Boom, share it, email it. What do you think? You know, a lot harder with traditional. I got to scan it, right? I got to import it. I got to format it. Then I get to send it, right? So, you know, we get that. But I very much have a hybrid approach. Whenever time allows me to do traditional, that's how I always warm up. Always. I always have what I call a toss away piece on my drafting table that either it could be something or it could not, right? If I like it, it may be something that goes on for sale. Right, or something I may, offer. I'm big on freebies. I really don't sell a lot of art, if I'm being quite honest. I kind of took my adage of not being married. I treat my art like my children. I tell people that, right? You don't marry your children. You raise your children to send them away. Yeah. Okay. So that's how I kind of treat my art, right? I tell artists, don't marry your babies, right? You create it to put it out. Yeah. Okay. I'm married to my wife, right? Not my children. And so when I draw something, I typically keep a very loose attachment to it. Right. So I've had people like, you're crazy for giving this away. You could charge $300 for this. I'm like, I'd rather them enjoy it. I might sell it. Depends on what mood I'm in. You know what I mean? But if you catch me on a live stream, and I'll never forget, I was live streaming one time and I was drawing this Godspeed on one of my sketch cards. And I went deep. I went with the acrylic highlights and the Copic markers and the stroke and the effects and all the zangs, and it was a beautiful card. And the dude literally said, and he was joking. He says, "Wow, can I have that?" And I was just in the moment. I said, "Sure, send me your email address." And he said, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm serious." And everybody's like, "Dude, are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm serious." If I had known, I would have asked. I'm like, "We should ask." And, I said,
But ask.
But once again, what does that do? It ingratiates me to my audience, right? It's not something I'm so attached to because I can do it again. That's the gift of art. I can do it again. I'll probably do it better next time. Because I learned something from it. But as far as my process, I usually start every day with something traditional, right? And maybe like an hour, maybe 2, depends on how deep I'm into the sketch or the doodle, because I know the majority of my day is going to be in a disconnected medium, which is digital. And to me, that's disconnected for me personally. I don't knock it. I know them all. Clip Studio, Photoshop, I know them all, right? Adobe Animate, I know how to animate in Clip Studio. I'm learning 3D now. I'm going to 3D now just because I just want to add it to my skill set, right? I'm teaching myself Blender. But that right there, that drafting table, that's always, man. Pencil, paper, markers, ink. I'm learning acrylics now because Doug, my cover artist, the illustrator, but he's actually giving me private lessons with acrylic painting. It's like I want to do some elevated comic geek stuff.
You've got the biggest Cintiq I have ever seen.
Say that again.
You have the biggest your drawing tablet.
Cintiq I have ever seen. Yeah,
this dinosaur.
Like I had one in 2015, but here is so hot, and I had my air conditioner broke, and I just started working that anyways with a fan onto it. Didn't work couldn't take the heat. Yeah, and I was all right. I'm back to the traditional.
What do you like to do? What's your process like, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh yeah. Behind me, you can see the beginning of the process here. I do a big pen on paper, and then I refine it. I refine it using many tools. I love digital art, and I work on that because there's no way that you're gonna lose your art by dropping coffee on it or doing anything that you can mess that up.
Right.
And it's quicker and it's cleaner, and I love it. But I always start on paper, pen and paper, not even pencils. Pen, paper. I get the rough idea. And I'm very surprised that those guys, Joel and John, they understand it, because sometimes guys, it is a crappy.
Yeah, that's what he messages. He's like almost embarrassed. I'm like, no,
it is embarrassing.
You're just showing. This is where it starts. Joel and I both bought a director's cut of a Ninja Turtles comic where, you just see the figures, the shapes, and that just it's like a geek out moment, you see how they form that, So
I love the raw stuff. I'm a huge fan of it. Yeah, because it shows how you're thinking. I feel like I'm getting a peek inside your skull.
Right.
When I look at the raw stuff, Yeah.
Yeah, the best thing when you do comics, you have to have good editors, because you have to make a connection, and you send something, they understand it, and you have to make some changes. They are just minor changes. And it's been like that so far. We have a long way to go, but so far, so good.
Yeah, you're using 3D background assets, I see.
No, that's drawn here. This is drawn line by line.
I was looking at the cityscape, that one.
Yeah. No, this is drawn line by line. By line,
that's a
there's
lot
no
of work.
there's no 3D resource.
That's nice.
But actually, this is this panel here. What brought the attention of people in the related communities, and I met Will Peden because of that panel, and I started doing U-turn. In April, I think it was April. and we just got funded. Oh, he's there. Yeah. Yeah, that's good that he's here. And then all everything started from there, you know, like
I love it.
And I'm very happy because
I'm a huge perspective geek. Like I'm a huge perspective geek. It's funny because when I did share with it was right behind me. When I did share with my class the story about Valiant Comics, one of his comments was my perspective that I needed work on. And this is the actual letter.
Wow.
Right? And see the date?
Wow. 95?
95.
Yeah. Right? And so I'm a memento geek. And so one of the things that he commented on that stuck with me was perspective. And so a lot of people, just like that caught my eye. That's why it caught my eye, because I'm a huge perspective buff, because that kind of stuck with me, you know. And now I get so many requests on perspective, but that was one of the first things he critiqued on me. He says, learn perspective. Whatever you do, learn perspective.
Yeah,
you know?
That's powerful. That's powerful.
It's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So now
crazy.
That's beautiful.
And then because of that, I met these guys here, and like it's all good, you know, like very happy.
Yeah,
it seems like you guys really rock together, man. That's how it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? I never wanted to get to the point where it feels like work.
Oh, it
You know
never
what I'm
feels like
saying?
work. Never feels like
Yeah,
work.
I don't want to get to a
Right.
point where it feels like work.
That's fun.
Yeah, because the funny thing is, like when I talk to some of my buddies in the industry, you know, granted they're machines. You know what I mean? They're machines, and they have to be because they have deadlines to meet, right, and bills to pay. And so, but it does. They've told me it feels like work, and primarily, I think, because they don't own it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like they don't have an ownership stake in it, you know, which I really think is crappy. Let me ask you guys' opinion on something. All right. So so just for all of you guys watching, right? Here's a marketing tip. Okay. Here's a marketing tip. If you want cred, go low bar. Here's what I mean. When I started doing Ka-Pow, I knew I didn't have any industry cred, right, that people would recognize. A lot of properties I worked on were, you know, nondescript or not as popular. So I actually took on sketch cards for Upper Deck. Do you know why? Because it allowed me to legally claim Marvel in my resume.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, it sure does. Yeah.
Right. So now on my website, you can see Marvel, Upper Deck, Warner Brothers, right? Immediate cred. So that's number one. Go low bar. They don't pay a lot, but if you can get a sketch card deal, take it if you're looking to just have that in your resume. All right. But here's what happened here's what's happening with Upper Deck. They don't pay well. Okay. They don't pay well.
That's terrible to hear.
Yeah, they don't pay well. Apparently, though, my cards are popular. Okay, for whatever reason, my cards are popular. I get an inbox from one of my buddies who's on eBay. Hey, Solo, is this you? So I click on the link and I see a card. Now, do you all know how much Upper Deck pays per card?
No.
If you're doing a sketch card, if you're doing a set, you get paid $3 per card.
Jeez.
And they have to be in color.
Whoa. That's
No
not 300.
way.
Not
Three.
300. 3. Yeah.
$3 per card, right? You get paid $3 per card. Okay. You get paid $3 per card to do an original artist sketch card, right? They'll send you, depending on how many cards are in that set, they'll send you a proportionate amount of what's called artist proof cards, which are blank. They have the Upper Deck logo, the foiling on them. And those are for you to sell at cons individually to make up for the difference of what they don't pay you. Does that make sense? So like, even though they're paying me $3 a card, I can sell an artist proof card at a con for $300 because it's got the upper deck, the Marvel logo, right? It's an original piece of art. I just have to but even though I have the artist proof, I have to get approval from upper deck before I sell it. I have to draw it and then send them a scan. And they have to approve it. Then I can give it to the so it's a lot. So anyway, number one, if you want to get cred and be able to claim, go low. It still rides legally. Anyway, they he sends me a link. He says, "Solo, is this you?" And I look, and this is when I had the epiphany. I saw that my card had sold for almost $300, right? I got paid $3 for it, and I'm seeing it go for almost $3. It was like 200 and some change. And I said, I don't know whether to feel flattered or feel insulted. Quite honest.
Right. I'll take the second option.
I didn't know what to.
No fucking way.
Dude, I was conflicted, bro. I was so conflicted. I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this, right? That somebody's willing to pay that or what I actually got paid for it. And so, anyway, they sent me a set. It was supposed to be Avengers Endgame, and I was really excited. But they have like these crazy rules, like you can't use the actor's likeness. Right. But it says Avengers Endgame. It's actually on my social media. Like I videotaped the box and me opening the box that says Avengers Endgame. So I'm excited because now you know what I'm about to do. I'm about to draw these Avengers Endgame and I'm gonna put that on my resume.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm going to market Avengers Endgame, right? And so when I saw the contract, I'm like, but you can't use any of the artist's likeness or any likeness from the movie. I was like, what? You know, how's this Avengers Endgame? So basically, I'm just doing Marvel Comics, whatever, you know. And so I sent them the cards back. I declined, right?
Wow.
And I thought that was going to be the end of that relationship.
I would just put that mustache on that.
I know, right?
All of them.
The glasses, the nose.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, right?
Those pokey eyes.
Yeah.
Right, the big nose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that's going to be the end of the relationship. And a few months later, dude inboxes me again. And I'm like, y'all got to pay me more. And I told him that. You know, I'm like, you got to pay me more. And this was like a real dialogue. I guess I'm not used to having these conversations, you know. And I sent him the link. I said, when I see my card selling for this, you know, I'm not even asking for that, you know, but I feel like I'm getting raped, right? You know, it turned into this long conversation. And so he wanted to offer me more cards at the same rate to cover the difference. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. No. Instead of doing 30, you're going to let me do 90 at $3 for a card. So why did I agree to it? I agreed to it, and he sent me the cards. And the cards, I didn't feel good about it, right? I sent them back again, saying no, thank you. And I think I sent them back like the day of the deadline. They had to be in the mail, and I sent them back undone, repackaged, and a card, no, thank you, inside the box. They just hit me up again last week, and I'm like, so now I'm asking like, why? And the dude, he was very, so I'm going to do this set. He was very transparent. He's like, I'll be honest with you. Of all the artists we have, I really like your work, you know, and I would like to keep you. I'm like, well, why don't you give me some of the actual cards that are going to print where I can really show off the stuff I have to do in Photoshop, you know, like the big name guys you got doing the stuff that goes inside the multi-card packs, you know, because these are just like individual cards that are really thick. Yeah. And I guess they're meant to feel like a deck of cards because they're so thick. Wow. But when they open it up, it's only one card, but it's an original piece of art. Right. I'm like, why don't you send me give me one of those jobs? Because I know they're making a lot more money, but they're doing cards that are being mass printed and put in decks as collectibles. And so he says, well, basically, you do this card set, let's talk. And I'm like, we're going to talk, though.
Yeah, you have to. That's part of it.
But we're going to have this conversation. So, yeah.
I would think that he would know, like, after, like, that takes some cojones to turn it down twice, right? Like I think he knows you mean you're gonna talk, like,
Right.
So yeah, so
we're going
yeah,
to talk.
yeah,
You know, so
cool.
that's his business, man. I mean,
Yeah, that's fantastic, fantastic. Perry, I have another kind of. It's not. I don't think it's a hard question, but it's something that kind of bugs me.
Okay.
Because like Brazil and the United States, like we have a lot in common. And when you mentioned earlier on about the amount of Black people in the market, you know, like that made me think that this is fucking unfair. You know, and even here in Brazil, I live in a city. It's called Salvador. Here, kind of 80% of people are Black. 80, not 18, 80. All right. It's like I don't feel it in here because like Black people are the majority, but we do acknowledge that there's racism and in many different forms. Sometimes in a very kind of I'd say it comes disguised, you know. But when I look at the indie industry, those you Black guys are ruling it. You know, there's Van Grant that's fucking ruling it, selling like 1,000 of books. There's Marcel Dupree, which is an editor, and I didn't know he was Black until last week because I had never get to see him, and it's like nobody really gives a shit what type of color you're wearing because we wear body,
right?
All right. Like I say, art people and people who are into comics don't really give a shit. Maybe there's some. Maybe some people do. But I would like to ask you, like, did you have any type of difficulties, just because you were Black or something like that, or not at all?
There is one story that I actually think. I think it was unintentional racial bias. And the reason I say unintentional is because they actually sought me out for it. Right. But the end result to me was a little bit crappy. I'm not going to mention any names, but I was commissioned to help a certain company or upstart company. They wanted to do the He-Man and they wanted to get the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe license for comics, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking early 2000, right? By then there wasn't a He-Man comic out. They were trying to get the license from Mattel, and they wanted to show the caliber of artists that they would have working on the property, right? And so when he contacted me, this said person, if you look on a particular show on Netflix, he's actually one of the people persons being interviewed, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I saw the
And
first
I won't
episode.
mention the show because he'll know what I'm talking about.
You don't have to.
But anyway, he called me. He's like, "Solo, man, we're trying to get the He-Man license. Would you be willing to contribute a piece for free?" Sure. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, we're cool. I mean, we're not friends. I don't use that. I don't toss one with the F word lightly, but we're cool. Not a problem. You're a good dude. So I do this elaborate little mock piece. With me, everything's a story. And so I did this story. What if it turns out it's actually what this current He-Man thing is about? Skeletor wins. So my actual illustration was Skeletor sitting on the throne inside a Castle Grayskull with Evil Lyn, my rendition of Beastman. I might post this on my social media because it's old. my rendition of the character Blades and Panther gnawing on the skull at his feet. And he's sitting in Castle Grayskull and he's chilling like this, like I got this, right? And so I did the piece, put a lot of TLC into it, sent it to him. Didn't think much of it. Never heard anything back. A few months later, I hear the announcement that they got the license, right? And that my other buddy, who's now a really big industry name, was going to be drawing the book. And that was actually his first pro foray, was this He-Man Masters of the Universe. And I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, congratulations on the book. He's like, oh, yeah, thanks. I'm like, so when did all this happen? They never even called and told me thank you. Turned out he ended up telling me that not only did they get the license, but my image was one of the cover images they presented to Mazel.
Oh, man.
And they didn't even call to tell me thank you. I'm like, okay, I can get not putting me on the book. You understand what I'm saying? Maybe my style didn't fit. I could get that. But I was a contributing factor to you landing that license, obviously. And you couldn't even say, yo, Solo, we got it, man. Thanks so much for your help. That was it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it turned out that I was the only person of color that was asked to draw. So I'm like, I don't think it was intentional. I've seen it. I'm not really, here's the thing about me. I'm not really quick to pull the race card. I'm slow with it. I know that it exists. Obviously, being a black man in America, I know that it exists. But just like how I've always done my job as a police officer, I like to make sure that I know what I'm looking at before I move, so that when I got you, I got you. You know what I mean? There's no backing off of it. There's no side pedaling. You're cornered. You're locked down. It's a wrap, right? And so when I do pull it, I want to make sure that that's really what it is. But when I did my research on the racial composition of artists in the industry, it was very disconcerting, because I knew how many exceptional artists I knew that were people of color that were not operating at the higher levels. I'm like, why is that? You know what I mean? They're not the ones making the decisions. They're not the ones doing some of the hiring. And granted, it should not even be, especially when we're talking about art, it should never be a matter of race. Now what we're talking about is our social issues. We're not talking about the art now. You understand what I'm saying? Because like you said, when we see art, we don't care. If it rocks, it rocks. If it's hot, it's hot. I don't care. I don't care if you're purple with pink polka dot.
Yeah.
You got skills. You got skills. It just is what it is. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not right here saying I'm gonna follow this artist because they're black. I'm gonna follow this artist because they're black, right? No, I'm like, dude's from Brazil. Dude got game. Oh my gosh, chick is from Spain. I'm following her. You understand? It's at face value of the quality of the work. And so when I see these decisions and I see these demographics pop up, the only thing that remains, and I know that's pervasive with artists, is that the people making these decisions are not the artists, right? There are people with other agendas. There are people with other socioeconomic other socioeconomic levels that are trying to maintain the status quo. But make no mistake, it's not about the art. It's not about the art, right? It's about much deeper social and personal issues. And so that's my take when I see it. But as it pertains to like what I'm trying to do with Ka-Pow, I firmly believe that as more, we don't have access to that in the hood. You understand what I'm saying? There's
Sure.
One of the things that I got when I started teaching online, especially I teach on this platform called OutSchool, right? For K through 12. It's been really blew up since the pandemic, right? I have so many messages in my inboxes from mothers of color saying that my kids love to draw, but they felt it was important for them to see someone that looked like them doing it, because when they go on YouTube, when they go, they're following the artists, but seriously, I'm like, most of them aren't black. You know, they're good, but they're not black, right? And when I started getting those messages, it really forced me to start going through my YouTube, because I really wasn't paying attention. If I'm being quite honest, I'm looking at the art. You understand? Not really the person who's drawing it. Oh, maybe paying attention if they're a good instructor, if they're delivering good information and good content. But the colors, really, I'm not looking at it, right? And as I started looking through all, I'm like, you're right. You're right. It is important. You know, representation really does matter, because what you see, you can achieve. You have to be able to see yourself sitting at that table. You have to be able to see someone who looks, we all feel better when we see somebody that looks like us doing the thing we want to do. You know, it connects with us on a very visceral, personal level, right? And I never really thought about it until these moms started inboxing me. And I'm telling you, I can pull them around, I probably have at least 6. And that's literally what they said. You know, when I saw you, and there's this also pervasive thought. I got it in the industry. I remember when I first started drawing at a respectable clip, one comic book store owner, and mind you, I'm young at this time, so I really didn't think much of it, so I wasn't insulted. He just kind of rolled off my back. But now I just, like, if I could go back, I would probably punch him in his grill. Okay. But he said to me, "Ooh, you draw really well. You know what I really like about your art? It doesn't look like it was drawn by a black guy." He literally said that to me. I never forget it. You know, and because the pervasive thought was that we didn't draw as good as non-black. And granted, there is an Afrocentric style, right? There's an urban style. I get that, right? I get that. But when he said, "Oh, it doesn't look like something that was drawn by a black guy," I was too young and naive to really hear what he was saying. And this was in Kentucky. It was the South, so it was probably some racial stuff to it. But now, you know, being older, looking back on it, I'm like, no, but you need to see some people of color doing it. Our kids need to see it. You know what I mean? If for no other reason, to let them know you can do this too. You don't have to, you know, do the other things. If this is what there's people like you doing this, you know. So yeah, it's become very important to me.
Yeah, you know, like it's very important that you were talking about this, because this is something that we have to acknowledge. Like, we have to admit that we live in a fucking unfair world, and all the resources are badly distributed. And those guys, like, you know, like the black community, they got the worst end of the stick. You know, no matter where you are, if you are in the United States, if you are in Europe as an immigrant, if you are here in Brazil. And there was something really great when Marvel did the Black Panther film. Mm-hmm. I saw Absolutely. Black kids here in my community looking at, going to
No.
Oh, we lost him.
I think we lost him.
We lost him. Oh no!
Got the plane coming in.
I think where he was going. Hopefully he comes back, but I think where he's going with it, like, it just became a movement, you know. And,
yeah.
It was huge, and I agree. I mean, I don't know if that's what he's going to say, but I'm assuming. Yeah.
It is huge. Is because it shows. It gave them a sense of pride, right? You know, even though I actually had to check a guy at church, a young black brother who didn't get it. Right. And one of the things I'm very cautious about millennials is, you know, everybody has a voice. Just make sure you're saying the right things. And I think those that are more mature, we have an obligation to correct bad thinking. You know what I mean? And this young brother was saying, he said, "Man, you guys are effing, you know," he didn't say effing, but you guys are freaking losing your stuff over Black Panther. We got real issues as a black community, and y'all talking about some myth fantasy place. And I looked at him. I said, "How dare you come against anything that makes our young black people aspire to be more, whether it's real or not?" And he got quiet. I said, it doesn't have to be real. I said, but it was allowing them to do his dream. I said, who are you to step on that? Right? I said, anyway, and said, what are you doing to move the needle?
Right.
I said, what are you really doing besides running your mouth to move the needle? You know, I said, how many kids are you mentoring? This is a real conversation.
Yeah.
I got in his face, but how many kids are you mentoring? How much money are you giving to charities? How many kids are you helping to pull out the hood, get them in college? What are you doing besides ranting about your problems with us enjoying this movie and this movement? And long story short, he was pretty much done after I got finished with him. But it's very important, and I'm not. And hear me, I believe in supporting what we do. Like, I support a lot of young Black independent books that have good content. Understand it, that have good content. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
I believe that no matter what, granted, we do want to show the love and to make sure these things exist, but there also has to be an agreed upon expectation of quality. You know, I've always told my sons this, you know, and this is just the world that we live in. I've told my sons this, you know, I said, you know, just being a young Black man in this country, you don't have the luxury to coast. You don't have that luxury because you're born behind the 8 ball. You understand? You have to be better. You have to, you know, I've been accused of being the consummate overachiever, but it was drilled in me that you have to be. You understand? Just to get an equal look, I have to do more. And that's the reality. You know what I mean? Yeah. I had to graduate at the top of my class in the military. I had to graduate at the top of my class on Chicago Police, and I did because I knew I had to. You understand? And even when I took that with even what I'm doing with Honor Studios, I could have just made it wherever I was creatively at that point. I'm like, nope. If I'm going to do this, it's got to be able to compete with Superman. It's got to be able to compete with Spider-Man visually. I said, that's who I'm up against. I'm vying for those eyes. It's got to at least be where they are, if not better. You understand? And so I don't say it as a woe is me. I don't say it as something to be afraid of, but it's a reality. You understand that it's reality. And granted, you know, I remember when I was in the military, this is a true story. And I kind of regret not taking advantage of it. I entered into the military. I scored very high on my tests for the ASVAB, and I'm over in Korea, and you know, I was a preacher's kid. And so what happens with all preacher's kids when they leave home? They go crazy. And I went crazy, right? I was partying my butt off, right? And so anyway, I'm over in Korea, and I get called down to my XO's office, the captain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did I get in trouble? Did I get somebody's wife pregnant? What did I do? Right? I was like out there like that. Dude. I just knew I did something because it was like right after the weekend. You know what I mean? And me and my boys, we did it every weekend, right? And so I get called down to his office, and I walk in, and there's these 2 guys standing there. One's Black, one's white, and they have these black berets, and it looks like a triangle with some kind of lightning bolt or something going through it, right? And so they're like, you know, I was a specialist at the time, Specialist Perry. This is such and such, such and such. They want to talk to you. And they presented me with this letter, and I read it, and they wanted me to start the application process, real story, for Delta Force. Wow. I just thought it was a Chuck Norris movie. No, seriously. I'm 19 years old.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm 19 years old. I'm like, this is real? You know, it's like, yeah. And so, you know, the black guy talked to me privately, and he gave me the whole speech, you know, about, you know, representation, what it means for us as a people to be, you know, granted these honors and all this other stuff. And so I called home and I talked to my mom, which was probably the worst person to talk to about such things at the time, but that's all I knew. And it turns out that I was selected, and this was during the time of affirmative action. Okay. I was selected because I ranked in the top 2% academically and physically of my racial group in the armed forces, not just the Army, across all armed forces. And I was insulted by it, right? I said, so basically you want me because I'm a smart, athletic Black kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not based on my merit as a soldier, right? But because you have a quota to meet to diversify this branch of the unified armed forces, because Delta Force is unified armed forces, right? Comprised of nations across all military branches. And I took exception to it. So I declined it. But as I got older, I got more conflicted, as I thought about that opportunity, because as I became more knowledgeable as to the head start, how far we are in the race culturally, and that even though it was given a somewhat negative slant, that at the very least it was some attempt to try to right a wrong. You understand?
Yeah.
And at the very least, whether you agree with it or not, it was an attempt. It may not have been well executed, right? But it was an attempt to try to level a playing field that cannot truly be leveled, as we need it to be leveled, right? And so when I see stuff like that, happening even today, I'm a little bit more tempered in my response. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, yeah, no, we kind of need that 40 acres and a mule. We got to play catch up. You know what I mean? And if this is it, and it helps propel my family, my legacy a little further to help, hopefully they can gain some ground in this race of life and equality. I have an obligation to give them that opportunity, so hopefully we can make a difference that, in the art world.
Yeah. Dr. Perry, that was really, that was something, that was something.
Yeah, man, we hit the 3-hour mark, so I don't know if we want to wrap this thing up. We can continue it offline, so that's cool.
Yeah, I was just asking, I want you to do so, as a finished job here with us tonight, leave a few words for the guys, not only from your community, but those guys they are not those guys that are disenfranchised. Is there any hope to break into the markets and make a living? If you not really properly represented. Mm-hmm. I want to have your take on it, and then you say your final words. And that was a great program anyway, and I thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for the time. I would say, whatever it is you feel you're called to do, now is the best time to do it. Social media is a game changer. If you're over 40, you've seen the doors that it opens up, right? There's an audience, no matter what you look like, no matter how you say it, right? You can be eloquent, or you could, butcher the King's English, but there's an audience for it. And as long as you're saying something that resonates with your target audience. So being small, being independent, I don't believe there's no such thing today, right? You're independent by no other definition that you're not attached to a big entity. You know what I mean? But nowadays, this is the day of the independent, right? We got the streaming wars. If you have an idea that you think can resonate, you got everybody and their mom has a plus channel now that's looking for content to vie against the other pluses. You know what I mean? It's just right for creators of all races and creeds. All I say is keep your head down, keep your knees bent in prayer, and keep those hands moving, keep them working. You know, that's my motto: head down, knees bent, hands moving. Right. And you can get there. There's an audience for everyone. All I say is once you get a platform that's worth paying attention to, say something that's worth listening to. You know, say something of value. You know, there's a lot of people pandering. There's a lot of people peddling for audiences, doing things for shock value. But I still believe that people today more than ever are looking for truth. They're looking for real, right? You know, our kids, my grandkids, this generation's smarter than any generation that preceded it. You know, they know real people, they know fakes and phonies. Put some real true work behind it, hone your craft, and put it out there. You know, somebody's listening, somebody's always watching. You know, I thank you guys for this platform. You guys are killing it. This has been a blast. This has been a blast. I hope that we get to do some things together. You know, you guys seem like really real down to earth guys, and you guys caught me before I got famous. So
yeah,
famous, you guys are in there.
We're gonna help you. We'll push you out. So you talk about giving back. It's what we do. So
I actually say that on my commissions list. Like, get it now at this price before I get famous. Because when I get famous, I won't have to do commissions. You know.
And then you can add worked with Livid Comics to your resume too, right? You can put that on your resume.
Yeah,
so.
that would look awesome.
Too. Absolutely,
Yeah,
I'd be honored,
really
man.
cool.
Absolutely, it'd be my absolute pleasure, man. But thank you guys so much, man. This has been a great time. I thank you guys for the opportunity.
Yeah,
we thank you.
We'll definitely do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Dr. Perry. Yeah, we'll do it again, man. It's been real. It's been awesome. So if you want to hang on the show, we talk after. So I'll roll the outro
I gotta
here.
I gotta hit the road in the morning.
I know. Yeah, me too. Yeah, we'll be
Thank
back.
you so much, fellas.
We'll be back Wednesday night, guys. We got Joe Bennett from Immortal Hulk back 8 o'clock different time. So August 4th. It'll be fun.
I'll be watching that.
Thanks for tuning in. Catch you guys on Wednesday night. Stay living.
Thanks, fellas.